Chapter 116. I can't thank you enough. I went to my brother's place to sit for a while. When I came back, I realized that the monthly votes had really exceeded the quota. I can't express how I feel right now. I'm going to update. I'm going to do it. I'm going to update tomorrow. It was another peaceful morning. Just like any other day, a large group of carriages appeared on the main road and headed towards the south gate. When they were about 100 meters away from the sentry post, the carriages slowly stopped. Justin poked his head out of the second carriage and looked around. He was stunned when he couldn't find Morrison's. Hi. Morrison's carried his great sword and walked out of the bar. However, he wasn't alone this time. Han Jin and Lang Ning were behind him. Lang Ning was also followed by a dozen knights. M.O. Morrison's University? Justin's expression changed. He obviously recognized Lang Ning. The curtain of the carriage was lifted and Borg came out. Han Jin and the others all had evil smiles on their faces. Even if he was really stupid and didn't know how to observe other people's expressions, the fact that someone who shouldn't be here had appeared proved everything. Along with a shrill whistle, a team of heavily armed knights appeared outside the town and blocked the way out of the town. At the same time, a team of soldiers also came out of the alleys. Borg's face turned livid. He stared at Moxink coldly and gnashed his teeth. Moxink, you're a traitor. How dare you betray me? Betray? You think too highly of yourself. Morrison's laughed gloatingly. Don't worry. We're just checking your goods. If there's really no problem, we'll let you go. Huh. Borg's eyes became sharp and filled with hatred. He then spat out two words, die. A magic staff appeared in Borg's hand. There was a very eye-catching large blue crystal embedded in the staff. After he spat out those two words, the crystal shattered and turned into countless sparks. At the same time, a huge and sharp icicle shot towards Morrison's. The casting speed of the spell was too fast, and the icicle was even faster. The most terrifying thing was that the icicle was a 9th-tier spell. Even a great magician would have a hard time casting it in an instant. Perhaps Borg's strength had reached an unfathomable level, or perhaps he was using the power of the magic staff. However, it was too late to say that now. The result, the most important thing, was the result. The gloating expression on Morrison's face disappeared. He had just swung his greatsword when the icicle pierced through his body and cut him in half. Blood splattered everywhere. People could clearly see Morrison's upper body fly into the air. Lang Ning's position was very lucky. He was not in the range of the icicle, but two knights behind him were caught in the crossfire and killed by the icicle. The icicle killed several people, but it was still unstoppable. It blasted a 2-meter-wide hole in the wall of the bar and flew into the bar. Then, there was a violent explosion, mixed with the screams of men and women filled with fear. Borg's face turned pale. He cast a 7th-tier spell, levitation, and his body rose into the air. However, as soon as his feet left the carriage, a tall wooden figure appeared in front of him out of thin air. It hugged him tightly in a very passionate and ambiguous manner, then pushed him down and pressed him to the ground. No matter how shocking the previous spell was, Borg was still a magician. He couldn't break free from the wooden giant no matter how hard he tried. Besides, he had already cast the icicle spell and the levitation spell, so he didn't have the energy to cast any other powerful spells. No, Borg struggled with all his might. Save me. One by one, figures jumped down from the carriages behind them. Some of them went up to the soldiers, while others rushed towards Borg. Unfortunately, due to the distance, Han Jin appeared in front of Borg one step ahead of them. He swung his fist down. With a boom, Borg's exposed right arm was broken by Han Jin's punch. It was twisted at a strange angle, followed by his left arm. Up. Berger let out an inhuman scream. He didn't know where he got the strength to kick Han Jin with one of his legs. However, a magician would only be asking for trouble if they fought hand-to-hand. Han Jin gently reached out and grabbed Borg's ankle. He then raised his leg and struck Borg's knee. With a crack, Borg's head tilted to the side, and he fainted. Get out of my way. A guard rushed over, his eyes red. He swung his sword at Han Jin. Han Jin snorted coldly. His body straightened, and his left hand pulled the guard's sword away. His right fist followed and hit the guard's chest. The guard spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. After using spirit possession, Han Jin's body became incomparably tough. He would not directly block the enemy's sword. Instead, he would choose the right angle to push the sword away. In addition, the strength of the guards was not high. Han Jin was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Every time he struck, a guard would fly backwards. The others could clearly see Han Jin's movements, but they could not block his attacks. Because of speed, because of strength. There was a saying in martial arts: one strong person could defeat 10 skilled martial artists. In the face of such a huge gap, all techniques were useless. Lang Ning roared and joined the battle like a mad tiger. Morrison's was Leger's comrade-in-arms. He could not accept this result, let alone face Leger. The soldiers swarmed forward and fought with the guards of the caravan. One side came prepared, the other side was panicking. The battle quickly tilted towards Riptide's side. Han Jin suddenly saw a ray of black light shooting towards him at a speed that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye. If his body had not been strengthened recently, with his speed, he would not have been able to react even if he saw it. Han Jin hurriedly stretched out his right arm and blocked the ray of black light. An arrow spun and flew into the air. A deep wound appeared on Han Jin's right arm. Blood gushed out, and he felt that his right arm was sore and painful. He could barely move it. Han Jin raised his head and saw a pair of eyes full of killing intent. At the same time, a dark green arrow sank into the ground. With Han Jin as the center, vines stretched out from the ground and wrapped around Han Jin. Han Jin roared and used a levitation spell to leap into the air. He did not dare to look away from the eyes of the elf. When his feet left the ground, he saw a trace of mockery in the elf's eyes. Then he saw a black arrow on the bowstring. Han Jin felt a chill run down his spine. The elf's posture was calm and confident, as if she had already sentenced her opponent to death. Obviously, she had full confidence in this arrow. Han Jin, on the other hand, was in midair and had nowhere to borrow strength or use Earth Meld. He could only be a target. I've lost. Han Jin groaned in his heart. He had actually lost 2 life-saving talismans. The art of faked earth was the reason why he dared to fight with all his opponents. He could not imagine how he would be able to walk in this world without the protection of the art of faked earth. At least for half a month, he could only obediently hide. A black light flashed, and what Han Jin was waiting for did not happen. The elf's longbow was drawn to a full moon, but the arrow could not be released. This was because an arrow had shot into her left ear and came out of her right ear. It had pierced through her head. Only then did Han Jin notice Sunir's figure. He could not describe the feeling of regaining what he had lost. If he was as bold as Morrison's, he might have shouted, "Sunir, I love you, kill." Lang Ning roared. His wildly beating heart finally calmed down. The scene of Han Jin being sniped almost drove him crazy. Morrison's had died. If Han Jin also died here, then he could really kill himself on the spot. Kill! The soldiers also shouted. There were only 2 senior professionals in the caravan. Now that one of them was dead and the other was injured, the rest were just a group of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Lang Ning swung his spear with all his might and sent a caravan guard in front of him flying. Because of his agitation, his strength was a little too much. Half of his body turned to the side, but the result was that he suddenly froze in place. His ferocious fighting spirit disappeared without a trace. There was only one person who could make him like this, and that was Morrison's. If Morrison's was still alive, then what was the point of him gritting his teeth and fighting? Morrison stood at the corner of the street, holding his great sword tightly. He was in a daze, as if he had been isolated from the world. He still could not react. Ow! Lang Ning could not believe his eyes. This was impossible. This was absolutely impossible. At such a close distance, when faced with an instantaneous icicle attack, any professional below the 8th grade would have no chance of escaping. Even a thief would not be able to escape. What's more, he saw Morrison's being killed with his own eyes. The desperate resistance of the caravan guards aroused the murderous intent of the soldiers. They no longer showed any mercy. Often, after cutting down their opponents, they would follow up with a few more blows. If a frightened horse ran around, they would kill it together with the horse. The whole street was filled with blood, and the sound of killing was deafening. The ninth town was an ancient town, and the residents had never experienced such a scene. They were all hiding in their homes in fear. No one dared to go out and watch it this time. The resistance of the caravan guards was getting weaker and weaker. Only a few guards were left hiding in the carriages, fighting for a little time to breathe. At this time, they did not have the energy to think about the value of resistance. They were only fighting instinctively for their own survival. The actions of the soldiers were getting rougher and rougher. They even overturned the carriages and poked the inside with their spears. There were a few women in one of the carriages. No one knew who they were, but the soldiers did not care. They surrounded the women and cut them down without giving them a chance to speak. In war, it was impossible to distinguish between individual behavior. His comrades and himself were one group, and all the enemies were another group. This was a fight between groups. Moreover, Riptide's military discipline was very strict. The soldiers would not have any other ideas. Since the enemy's group threatened their survival, then they would kill them all. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 117. Morrison's slowly walked towards Hanjin, but the way he walked was a little strange. Those with good eyesight could see that his hands and legs were trembling slightly, and his eyes were wandering around as if he was thinking about something. What just happened? Lang Ning could not help but ask Morrison's. Morrison's ignored Lang Ning and walked straight toward Hanjin. He reached out his hand to pat Hanjin on the shoulder, but for some reason, his hand stopped in midair. After a while, he slowly pulled his hand back. Raphael, from today onwards, my life is yours, Morrison said with a hoarse voice. Hanjin's gaze had been fixed on Sunir. When he heard Morrison's words, he turned around and looked at Morrison's in surprise. Lang Ning was also surprised, but he immediately realized that Morrison's escape from death must have something to do with Hanjin. Otherwise, he wouldn't speak in such a heavy tone as he had always been carefree. From today onwards, my life is yours. Morrison's repeated. He could not describe the fear he felt after coming back from death. In the end, all his excitement and impulsiveness turned into a surging feeling of gratitude. He felt that only a promise could express his feelings. Hanjin looked at Morrison seriously. After a while, he smiled and said, Morrison's, I'm not used to the way you are now. Is that so? Morrison scratched his head. He also felt embarrassed. Some things could be done without saying. Morrison's laughed. Then, Raphael, give me another life. You? Hanjin did not know whether to laugh or cry. Have you learned your lesson? Yes. Morrison's nodded seriously. Damn it. I shouldn't have wasted time talking to him. I should have just attacked him. At this time, Sunir had already walked over. She looked at Morrison's and smiled. Morrison's, are you really okay now? I can't be any better now. Morrison's waved his sword. Look, Raphael, you've created a miracle. Sunir's face was full of admiration. To be honest, when you buffed Morrison's, I did not believe that such a miraculous spell existed in the world. You have overthrown the common sense that most people know about magic. The scene suddenly became quiet. Everyone's eyes were focused on Hanjin. If an outsider heard this, they would definitely think that Sunir was a traitor and a blasphemer. This was because there was only one kind of existence that could break the common sense of magic and not be restricted by the rules. That was God. A loud crash woke Sunir and the others up. The guards of the merchant group had all been killed. A few soldiers went to check the overturned carriages. As soon as they opened the lids of the carriages, dozens of heavy armors rolled out from within. Lang Ning's expression immediately became serious. The soldiers quickly went to check the other carriages. As expected, the other carriages were filled with military supplies. There were bundles of arrows, swords, and war spears. Some of the carriages were even filled with strange metal parts. The soldiers could not tell what they were used for. Heavens! General! General! A soldier who jumped on top of the carriage suddenly shouted. He even forgot to keep it a secret. Magic crystal cannons. There are magic crystal cannons inside. Sunir and Lang Ning gasped at the same time. They were both soldiers and knew the purpose and power of magic crystal cannons very well. They did not care about anything else and rushed towards the carriage. Lang Ning jumped on top of the carriage and pushed the soldier away roughly. He looked inside and saw two magic crystal cannons quietly hiding in the dark. The clean and smooth bodies of the cannons and the black muzzles made Lang Ning feel dizzy. General, there are magic crystal cannons here too. 20 meters away, another soldier shouted. Shut up, Lang Ning shouted with all his strength. His eyes involuntarily fell on the two merchants. What are they doing? Where did they get the military supplies? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk that night. Riptide's 1st and 2nd Cavalry Brigades garrisons were heavily guarded. No matter which angle one looked at it, one could see at least 10 fully armed soldiers patrolling around. Hanjin, Sunir, Sesu, Vijay, and Lang Ning were sitting around a long table and discussing something in low voices. The atmosphere was very heavy. Borg and Justin had already revealed all the secrets they knew under the torture of the military law team. Hanjin and Leger were worried that they might miss something, so they interrogated them separately. These two people were not easy to deal with, but Hanjin's methods were more gentle and modern, while Leger's methods were much more bloody. Borg and Justin had been tortured beyond recognition, but what they had revealed could be described as earth-shattering. After getting acquainted with Leger and helping Leger to take back part of the military power, Hanjin had thought about setting his foundation in Bite Man and developing bit by bit with the help of Leger's army. In other territories, the lords were supreme, so he couldn't do anything to them. However, the four Castellans and Bite Man were always scheming against each other, so there was always an opportunity for him to have conflicts. Unfortunately, he was not the only smart person in the world. What he could think of, others could also think of, and what he could see, others could also see. What's more, that person not only thought of, but also saw through, and started his own action more than 10 years ago. He was Woodrow, the chief sheriff of Bite Man City. As the eldest grandson of Woodrow, Borg knew many secrets of Woodrow. When these secrets were revealed in front of Hanjin and the others, they all felt a bone-piercing chill. Woodrow's plan was complete. His thoughts were vicious, his plans were meticulous, his details were meticulous, and his foreshadowing were numerous. It was simply astounding. The four Castellans took turns to take charge of the government affairs of Bite Man City, the capital city. However, the position of the chief sheriff had always been held by Woodrow. He was very good at dealing with people and cleverly maneuvered among the Castellans. He always showed his prestige and potential just right, and at the same time appeared to be very well-behaved and obedient. Therefore, no matter which Castellan was in power, he would only try to build a good relationship with Woodrow so that he could gain the greatest benefits in Bite Man City, and would never try to replace the chief sheriff. For more than 10 years, Woodrow had been striving for his ideal for more than 10 years. He had quietly extended his tentacles to various fields and had never let anyone feel threatened by him. When the chief of Legion of Conrad was still alive, he often praised Woodrow, and the four Castellans also had a good impression of Woodrow. When talking about Woodrow, almost everyone would say that Woodrow was a good man, a very good man. In fact, it was not a big deal that he could deceive the chief of Legion of Conrad, because a gentleman could be deceived in a proper way. However, if he could deceive those crafty old men, his cunning could never be underestimated. Hanjin and the others felt a bone-chilling coldness, not because of Woodrow's current strength, but because of his inhuman endurance. They felt as if they were looking at a venomous snake that was quietly lurking in the dark. Rudolph was Woodrow's confidant, and Woodrow had secretly chosen him as the future chief of Riptide. There was indeed a Bite Man who had colluded with Zagund, and that was Woodrow. When the armies of the four Castellans launched a counterattack, it would be the opportunity for Woodrow to launch an attack. He would seize the control of the 4 acropolises at one stroke. As for the capital city of Bite City, he had long been the uncrowned king there. Things had been made clear, and the reason was easy to understand. Zagund's former ally, Lord Malay, had shown signs of parting ways with Zagund. Zagund was eager to find a new ally, so he naturally hit it off with Woodrow. Everyone had seen the destructive threat of Zagund, but why couldn't Woodrow see it? This was even easier to understand, because this was his only chance to break away from Zagund after he had truly grasped the power. And Zagund didn't have any illusions about their future. All he needed was a period of rest and recuperation. What was even more surprising was that many people knew that Woodrow was a magician, but he rarely showed his real strength, nor did he have a chance to fight with others. People only thought that Woodrow was a warlock, or at most a sage. In fact, Woodrow was a 10th-level magician. When Leger turned over Borg's private part with a red-hot soldering iron, Borg not only shed some filthy liquid, but also leaked the top-secret information. After Rudolph was killed, his father, Chazos, should have been responsible for this matter. As the eldest son, Chazos was eager to do something big, but as the eldest grandson of the eldest son, Borg was even more anxious. After Woodrow became the Lord, who would be the worthy successor? They were willing to fight for this answer at all costs. Woodrow had been planning for his whole life, but now the secret had been leaked by his eldest grandson before he could even do anything. Although it was impossible to estimate the harm caused by this, it was undeniable that the significance of education was too important. As for other minor issues, they naturally reached a consensus. For example, how could Borg release the icicle spell in an instant? Who made those magic crystal cannons? Sessu had always been diligent, and with the help of Han Jin, he had now become a 6th-level warlock, which was already very surprising. Borg was obviously a playboy, so how could he become a 7th-level sage? Talent alone could decide everything? What should we do? Lang Ning asked softly. His eyes fell on Han Jin, because in comparison, Han Jin looked the most relaxed. Anyway, we're going to Black Raven City, so it won't affect us here. Han Jin paused. But Lang Ning said that we'll fight back in the future. Do you think it's better for the Bite Man to be controlled by the 4 Castellans, or for Woodrow to become the Lord? Of course it's better for the 4 Castellans to control it separately, Lang Ning said. That's easy. The 9th town is under the control of the West City. We can send someone to invite Winston, the Castellan of the West City, and let him see what we've seized with his own eyes. Let him ask Borg himself. He knows better than us what to do. Woodrow is a great magician. Sassu stuttered. Do you think Chazos will tell Woodrow these things? Han Jin laughed. Does he want to be replaced by other brothers? While he's trying to hide all this, we may have left long ago. Han Jin's words opened up everyone's mouths. As if the situation was not so critical, they all put forward various suggestions. Chapter 118. This was definitely a huge fortune that would make anyone jealous. Not to mention the seized fleet, Leger and Sassu also found the shipping point of the goods. They seized 3 large underground warehouses and found a lot of military supplies, which were all given to Rudolph by Woodrow. They were preparing for the future expansion of the army in war. Rudolph was killed, 9th Town fell into Leger's hands, and the 4 Castellans were about to send troops to fight against Zagund. Time waited for no one. Chazos had no choice but to try to transport the military supplies out. Unfortunately, he gave the wrong person and ruined his plan. As for Morgan and Company, it was now Woodrow's property. Dismark in the Holy Crown City cleaned up the headquarters of Morgan and Company. When Woodrow heard the news, he followed suit and took over several branches of Morgan and Company. No matter the former or the latter, they all knew that this kind of thing was taboo and would arouse the disgust and hostility of other business groups. Dismark was forced to do it, and Woodrow had no other choice. Rebellion was supposed to go against the current, so it was inevitable to do something like drinking poison to quench one's thirst. However, Chile suffered a great blow. Fortunately, Han Jin and the others protected her and looked forward to the future for her. After occupying Black Raven City, she could rebuild Morgan and Company there. Since her ancestors could create such a big situation, so could she. However, Hanjin and the others ignored the pressure on Qi Li. People could only mature faster under pressure and adversity. This saying sounded pretentious, but it was still reasonable. At dusk, everyone gathered together to chat. This was a habit that they had developed when they were on the move. They would spend some time chatting every day because they had nothing to do at that time. Now that they had settled down, this habit had become an inexplicable habit. Leger and Langny, who had joined later, had also adapted to the habit. It was undeniable that chatting could also improve the relationship between the members of the team. It cannot be ignored. For example, Leja and Langning had become very familiar with everyone and could joke around naturally. This was the effect of chatting. Hanjin sat at the table and flicked his finger. A black beetle about half the size of a melon seed quickly climbed up along the table. Raphael, don't waste your magic power. Morrison stared at the little beetle. Why don't you help me? I've already said it. Write down the lesson you've been taught. Write it 1,000 times, and I'll cast another spell on you, Hanjin said without raising his head. Low chuckles sounded around them. This kind of request was nothing to Qi Li, but to Morrison's, it was enough to take his life. What are you laughing at? Morrison's raised his head and yelled. The moment he looked up, the little beetle jumped onto Morrison's without making a sound. Raphael, do you still not have enough magic power to cast that substitute spell? Sunir asked softly. Morrison's experience had greatly affected everyone. Previously, everyone was more or less suspicious of the effect of Hanjin's spell, but the facts had proven everything. What was a person with a dream most afraid of? It was a mistake. Mistakes in judgment, reactions, and so on. Mistakes could often lead to disastrous consequences, or even death. Hanjin's spell gave everyone a chance to make up for their mistakes. There was nothing more precious than this in the world. Sunir had a special identity and was knowledgeable. Even she was looking forward to Hanjin's spell, let alone the others. Hanjin thought for a moment. Tomorrow should be enough. Morrison's suddenly became silent. The others also shut their mouths, their expressions complicated. When Hanjin was unable to cast the spell, or when they did not know the exact effect of the spell, everything seemed simple. But now, things had become complicated. There was only one spell for the time being. Who would benefit from it? To put it bluntly, who did not want to be protected by Hanjin? Accidents could happen at any time. Perhaps because Hanjin did not choose them, they would die in an accident not long after. This had nothing to do with unity. There was no such thing as a complete altruist in the world. This was determined by the law of evolution. Morrison's pestered Hanjin every day to ask for magic buffs. However, when he knew that Hanjin would be able to cast the spell tomorrow, he had a strange feeling in his heart. This was because Hanjin had only helped him before. No one else had received Hanjin's protection. If the spell was cast on him again, he would be very ashamed. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Hanjin sighed in his heart. In fact, he could already cast the faked Earth Corpse, but he was worried that something like this would happen. When it came to leading an army, he was definitely not as good as Langning and Sunir. When it came to fighting skills, he was definitely not as good as Morrison's. When it came to human nature, Hanjin's understanding was much deeper than Sunir and the others. If a private investigator was hired for a matter, it would definitely be tricky or not. Hanjin had seen many strange and bizarre things. He was very clear that if it was handled well, everyone would be more united than before. If it was not handled well, there would be estrangement in everyone's hearts. In one word, it was difficult. Choosing to be an autocratic leader might be a good idea. The problem was that although his special magic and some misunderstandings had allowed his position to rise like a rocket, the time they had spent together was still too short for him to be a leader. That little beetle had already climbed onto Moxink's shoulder, but Moxink was thinking about something and didn't notice it at all. All of a sudden, the little beetle jumped and drilled into Moxink's ear. Morrison's was shocked. He quickly reached out to grab it, but the little beetle had already crawled into his ear. Morrison's fingers were very thick. They could not even be used to pick his nose, let alone his ear. Morrison's was so anxious that he slapped and scratched at the little beetle. After a while, he finally understood and looked at Han Jin with a bitter face. "A little beetle is difficult for a 7th grade fighter like you," Han Jin said with a half-smile. "Don't underestimate little things, understand? Is an ant small? But an ant can turn a 1,000-year-old tree into rotten wood, turn a tall building into ruins, and even make a dam burst. A little bit of selfishness and dissatisfaction might not sound like much, but can destroy a team in the end. Take the incident a few days ago, for example. If Chazos did not have any selfishness and reported the news to Woodrow immediately, what would have happened? Sunir, Sassu, Leger, and Lang Ning were not idiots. They immediately understood what Han Jin was trying to say. They looked at each other and smiled. Itchy. Morrison's did not have time to think. Han Jin smiled. The little beetle crawled out of Morrison's ear. Morrison's looked as if he had seen a demon and swept the little beetle to the ground. Sunir looked at the little beetle curiously and then bent down. But when she squatted down, the little beetle suddenly jumped up and bumped into her neck. It slid down her chest and slid into the soft armor. "Raphael!" Sunir covered her chest with her hands and shouted in a tender voice. Han Jin was stunned. With his personality, he would never take liberties with Sunir. Even if he wanted to, he would not do it in front of everyone. He originally wanted to let the little beetle jump onto Sunir's leg armor, but there was a time difference when using telepathic thoughts to control Faye. Moreover, the little beetle was too small. Plus, he did not expect Sunir to suddenly squat down, so this happened. "I didn't do it on purpose," Han Jin hurriedly explained. "Let out first. You were holding it so tightly. How can I let it out?" Even though she was wearing a mask, he could see that Sunir was gritting her teeth. If it was just a normal little beetle, Sunir would not be so serious. But Han Jin had just bragged that he could use the puppet monster's perspective to observe the scenery. This meant that wherever the little beetle ran to, Han Jin could see it clearly. It would be strange if Sunir let go. "Ahem," Leger coughed. "I have something to do. Let's go out and talk." "Understand," Morrison suddenly shouted. His face was full of wisdom. "I finally understand why Raphael made such a small puppet monster. Do you think Sunir and Chi Li would notice if there was such a little beetle in their room?" Don't talk nonsense." Han Jin glared at Morrison's. Seeing that Sassu and Leger were both surprised, he hurriedly explained, "Don't you think that this little puppet monster is very useful for scouting?" "Yes." Sassu and Leger nodded at the same time. Both of them said in a strange tone, "It is indeed useful for scouting." Morrison's added, "So is it scouting or peeping?" Han Jin was stunned and speechless for a moment. He suddenly realized that there was still a long way to go before he could make a decision. "Don't talk nonsense. Raphael is not that kind of person," Chi Li suddenly said. "I don't care if he is that kind of person." Sunir said word by word, "Let it out. Right now." She had a special identity and experience. Most of the people who knew her true face knew her identity. She had always been respected by others. No one dared to make fun of her or even pursue her. Because most men cared about their reputation, they were unwilling to be the toad who wanted to eat the swan's meat in case they would be laughed at. As for those who didn't care about their reputation, it was hard for them to climb to a high position in this troubled world. Strength was the foundation. How could they improve themselves if they didn't care about their self-esteem? They had no chance or qualification to do anything. Because of the lack of similar experiences, Sunir didn't know what to do. She felt both ashamed and angry. Although she could see that Han Jin didn't do it on purpose, she had to protect her reputation. She was in a dilemma. Morrison's looked at Chi Li as if he had discovered a new continent. No, what's wrong?" Chi Li blushed. At this moment, a soldier's voice came from outside the door. "Young Marshal, there are some people outside the camp who want to see you." One of them said she was the granddaughter of Woodrow, the chief sheriff of Bite City. Chapter 119. When a woman in a long purple dress gracefully walked in, the farce in the room was over, and several people were sitting there calmly. Although Sunir felt embarrassed just now, she was wearing a mask all the time, so no one could see anything unusual about her. You are. Han Jin stood up with a smile, glancing at the woman and the guards behind her. The woman in the lead looked very dignified and elegant, but her guards were a bit strange. Each of them was wearing a full suit of heavy armor, with an iron cover over their helmets. They were dressed like knight, but now they were not in a battle, so there was no need to cover their faces with iron covers, which would make people feel uncomfortable. Are you Leger, young marshal? The woman said in a stiff tone, My name is Gloria, the granddaughter of Woodrow, the chief magistrate of Bite City. Han Jin was stunned. While he was still in a daze, the woman called Gloria continued, 3 days ago, your cavalry attacked our family's caravan. Today I'm here to ask for an explanation. Hearing the woman's words, Han Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was not the plot he had planned. Given Woodrow's scheming mind, his son Shazos should have known something about him. It was normal for him to send someone to inquire about information, but it was impossible for him to reveal everything at once. At least, Borg was under strict control, and the other party had no way to know whether Borg had confessed or not, or how much he had confessed. Therefore, they would try every possible means to sound him out during the conversation. He replaced Leger because he was worried that Leger would give the game away. His plan was to pretend to be polite to the other party. No matter how far the conversation went, he would never reveal the fact that Borg had confessed. In this way, Woodrow would think that his plan was not leaked and would not take drastic measures easily. He wasn't afraid of smart people, but he was afraid of fools. This kind of scene was somewhat strange. Han Jin had wanted to help the other party hide the truth, but the other party had explained everything clearly. That level of openness was second only to Borg, who had confessed. In some aspects, he was even worse than Borg. Back then, Borg had refused to reveal his origins, and it was only after the torture that he was forced to reveal it bit by bit. This woman, on the other hand, claimed that she was here to negotiate, but in the end, her first move was to strip him naked. Did she not know that the word awkward existed in this world? Now, it was impossible for Han Jin to feign ignorance. Trying to cover it up would only make it more conspicuous. Not only was Han Jin in a daze, but Leger, Sunir, Sesu, and the others were also in a daze. Leger even glanced at Han Jin. What was there to be nervous about against such an opponent? Seeing that she had gained the upper hand with a show of strength and intimidated everyone present, the woman's eyes flashed with a fierce glint as she slowly said, Also, my younger brother, Borg, should have been captured by you, right? I want to see him. If you didn't hurt him, you will feel lucky. If you hurt him, then you will be punished. Don't blame me for not reminding you. My grandfather, Chief Magistrate Woodrow, is a 10th level magician. Han Jin looked at Sunir and the others, and Sunir and the others were also looking at him. He finally understood that the so-called dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and the son of Mouse knows how to dig holes was absolutely wrong. Not to mention that Woodrow wasn't the leader yet. Even if he really controlled the entire Bite Man, he would still have to consider the internal conflicts of the ruling class. At the very least, he couldn't go to the military camp and throw a tantrum, right? Shameless, Chile suddenly said. This was understandable. Woodrow had snatched away the wealth that belonged to Morgan and Company, so she naturally hated him to the extreme. What did you say? The woman called Gloria raised her eyebrows and shouted sternly, Say it again. A pheasant desperately flapping its tail, trying to show off its beautiful feathers. Guess what everyone will see at this time? Morrison squinted his eyes. See what? Sasu asked curiously. A****. Morrison's had a heartless expression on his face. Everyone burst into laughter. Even Han Jin and Sunir couldn't help but laugh together. The woman called Gloria's face turned green and then white. In the end, she said coldly, It seems that you are determined to go against us. Let alone Woodrow, even your father, Shazos, doesn't know that you are here, right? Han Jin said in a sympathetic tone. He believed that even if Shazos was an extremely stupid son of a rich family, he wouldn't do such a stupid thing. As for the woman in front of him, her stupidity had reached an incomprehensible level. In the past, he had always heard people say that someone was dumber than a pig. He used to think that it was just an exaggeration, but now he knew that it was actually a fact that happened occasionally. The woman called Gloria ignored Hanjin. Her gaze was vicious. She only glanced at Morrison's and Sasu, who were laughing nonstop. She said word by word, "You will pay for this." She was trying to engrave every word she said into the hearts of her enemies, or even into the depths of their souls. Therefore, she spoke very slowly, and her lips moved very forcefully. She looked like she was gnashing her teeth. "She does look like her," Leger suddenly said. His words were incomprehensible, but when they followed Leger's gaze, they saw Gloria's blood-red little mouth. The crowd burst into laughter again. Morrison's was laughing so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. He even gave Leger a hard punch. Sunir and Chili felt that these men were too rude. Although the joke was a little vulgar, they couldn't help but laugh. The woman called Gloria was so angry that her whole body was trembling. Hanjin was a little skeptical that she didn't understand what they were laughing at. Perhaps she was just angry because of the rude laughter. "I hope you know what you have done." Gloria's voice was trembling. "You have angered a true powerhouse. I can guarantee that you won't be able to withstand the anger of the 10th grade great magician, Mr. Woodrow." She only dared to come here because she was a 10th grade great magician. If Hanjin and the others didn't listen to her, her mouth would really become, "Then go back and tell Mr. Woodrow that we hope to see his anger as soon as possible. If we wait until the bloody night, Gerald, arrives, he will have to vent his anger through other channels," Sasu said with a smile. He was very dissatisfied that the other party would use a 10th grade professional to scare people, so he brought up Gerald. However, these people seemed to be possessed. Ever since Morrison's scolded them, they would mention that thing in less than 3 sentences. When the words Gerald came out, the bodies of the guards behind Gloria stiffened. Gerald was Dismark's #1 general and had a heavy killing record. As the saying goes, a person's name is like a tree's shadow. It was impossible for them not to be afraid. However, Gloria sneered, "Bloody Night, Gerald? Who does he think he is?" Hanjin sighed and shook his head as he stood up. Although his temper had always been good, he really couldn't tolerate this kind of big-breasted and brainless woman. "You do it. I'm going back to rest," Hanjin said to Leger. "You said that you would negotiate, so you should be the one to negotiate. You're a man. You have to keep your word." Leger refused. "Sigh. My stomach hurts from laughing." Morrison stood up lazily and suddenly shot forward. The great sword in his hand was like lightning as it slashed towards Gloria's neck. Moxing's attack was so sudden that Gloria and her guards didn't have time to react. It was not until Moxing's sword was already on Gloria's neck that the guards pulled out their swords and shouted, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Let go of our young lady." "Bastards." Morrison's didn't say a word. He only turned around and looked at Hanjin. Hanjin didn't say anything. Then he snapped his fingers. Sasu waved his hand, and a spike emerged from the ground. The guard who was attacked quickly retreated and dodged the spike. He didn't dare to fight back. He said coldly, "Master Leger, we are here to negotiate. If we can negotiate, we can continue. If not, we will leave. Don't you think it's too despicable to do this?" Hanjin remained silent. After a while, he said, "You can leave." Morrison's put away his great sword and returned to his lazy appearance. The guards quickly surrounded Gloria and retreated step by step until they reached the door. Hanjin smiled. "Don't waste your energy. If I really wanted to hurt you, you wouldn't be able to escape even if you crawled on the ground." The guards glanced at Hanjin coldly, then turned around and left. "What? You don't want to make things difficult for these idiots?" Morrison's laughed. "Raphael, what's wrong? Your expression is not right." Leger was very attentive. "No matter what you do, it's best to be just right. Overdoing it will bring you trouble." Hanjin smiled. "Have you ever seen such a stupid woman?" "No." "You said that woman. There is something called the subconscious mind." Hanjin slowly said, "For example, if you're walking on the street and a carriage suddenly crashes into you, or if you care about your family or friends, You will use your fastest speed to dodge and protect them. Even after you are done, you won't know what you just did. If the carriage crashes into a stranger or someone you don't care about, your reaction speed will be much slower. And this is not something you can control. That is why it is called the subconscious mind. Leger, Sunir, and the others listened carefully to Han Jin's explanation. What Han Jin said was something they had never heard of before. Even if they had similar experiences, it was impossible for them to form a system of professional knowledge. When Morrisons attacked the woman, their reaction speed was too slow. Only when Sasu released the earth spike did their reaction speed pass. Han Jin paused. So what? Morrisons asked curiously. We should take action. But, Sunir hesitated. If there is really a problem here, then what is their goal? To let the woman tell us all the secrets? Secrets? Han Jin smiled. How could a detective not know how to make deductions? When one's deductions reached a bottleneck, one had to come up with as many hypotheses as possible to find inspiration. If they already know everything that happened here, then is it still a secret? You mean there's a spy in the camp? Lang Ning suddenly stood up. How long has Rudolph been here? How could he not have people supporting him? Leger said in a cold tone. Chapter 121. In a small forest outside the 9th town, a group of black shadows gathered together. There were about a dozen people on one side and only one on the other side. Sir, you shouldn't have come. Borg has already told us everything he knows. A man in the armor of the Riptide Regiment said in a low voice, It's too dangerous for you to do this. If Leger and his men want to harm you, no one can save you. Cremont, you finally came out to see me? The one who spoke was a soldier in full heavy armor. His voice was soft, and he was much shorter than the other soldiers. His voice was very sharp. Obviously, he was a woman. The woman who negotiated with Han Jin was now hiding behind the crowd. There was no room for her to interrupt. Sir, what do you mean by that? The man called Cremonti asked in astonishment. I've been waiting for you for a whole day and night. What about you? Don't tell me you didn't see the signal we left. Sir, it's not that I don't want to go out, but I can't. Cremont said anxiously. The inspection is too strict. I just found a chance. Oh, all right, I can understand you. The woman's voice suddenly became sharp. But what were you doing when Borg was about to transport our goods out of the 9th town? Do you know how much damage you've caused us? Sir, how can you blame me? Cremont said, since Lang Ning came back, all the patrols and checkpoints were taken care of by the Knight of the 1st Cavalry Regiment. What could I do? When the 1st Cavalry Regiment set up the trap, I was still sleeping. I didn't even know what was going on when I heard the battle cries. Besides, I'm just a squadron leader. Even if they were going to do something, they wouldn't inform me in advance. If I really had the ability, would I have told Borg to go to Morrison's? I could have helped them transport the goods out by myself. We tried, but the 1st Cavalry Regiment only obeyed the orders of Leger and Lang Ning. They didn't care about the general of the 2nd Cavalry Regiment at all. The woman was silent for a moment, and then said slowly, How long did Borg last after he was caught? About half a day. And then you told him everything, more or less. It's only been half a day, but the atmosphere in the camp has suddenly become tense. Oh, it's worse than I thought. Useless idiot, the woman said in a sarcastic tone. Sir, since you've guessed that Borg would betray us, why are you still here? Cremont was stunned. I have no choice. I have to figure out their attitude. The female voice said slowly, It seems that they don't want to go against us, and they have some misgivings about my grandfather. However, they don't seem to show any signs of moving closer to us. What do they want to do? At this time, they should be on our side? That's why I'm curious. Sir, what does Sir Xiazwa mean? Shazos, the female voice sneered. Out of politeness, I shouldn't speak ill of my elders. But Uncle Xiazwa, his talent isn't much better than Borg's. When I asked them to do things, each of them was more stupid than the other. When I asked them to destroy everyone's efforts, they became outstanding geniuses. Sir, there's something I don't know if I should say. Cremont sighed. Go ahead. Actually, Sir Rudolph isn't that talented. Cremont smiled bitterly. He shouldn't have destroyed the honor of Knight of Conrad, and he shouldn't have dealt with Lang Ning. But he wouldn't listen to me, no matter how hard I had tried to persuade him. Since the death of Knight of Conrad, Lang Ning's reputation in the army is getting higher and higher. He's quick-witted, and strong-willed. He's an extremely rare general. Why don't we pull him to our side, instead of trying to destroy him? Is Lang Ning really as powerful as you say? Then why was Rudolph able to get rid of him with just a little trick? If it weren't for Leger, Lang Ning would have been killed. Sir, Lang Ning is a general. He's not good at these things. Cremont raised his voice a little, but when it comes to fighting on the battlefield, none of us can compare with him. Sir, when His Excellency the Chief Sheriff takes action, we have to compete with the 4 Castellans on the battlefield. Do you really think you can defeat the armies of the 4 Castellans with this little trick? Do you really think you can control the Bite Man with only tricks? Tricks? What do you mean? The woman said with displeasure. Cremont paused and sighed. Sir, these are my heartfelt words. If I offend you in any way, please don't mind. However, I understand Sir Rudolph's idea. He wants to become a legion commander like the Knight of Conrad. So he wants to completely eliminate the influence of others in the Legion. As for dealing with Lang Ning, Sir Rudolph can get the appreciation of His Excellency, the Chief Sheriff, only because of his loyalty. When it comes to the battlefield, can loyalty defeat the armies of the 4 Castellans? At that time, Lang Ning's brilliance will be unstoppable. Sir Rudolph is afraid that Lang Ning will get the attention of the Chief Sheriff and eventually replace his position. After we defeat the 4 Castellans, will we be satisfied with hiding in the Bite Man? If we expand outward, will we use Rudolph to command the war? He was just a dog that knew how to please his master and scare people with his teeth. What could he do? But Lang Ning is a sharp sword. Cremont didn't want to talk about this, but since he had already said it, he had to vent all his depression. Rudolph lost because of this. He tried every means to slander the reputation of the Legion of Conrad, which made the soldiers very dissatisfied. He also framed Lang Ning. This kind of dissatisfaction reached the extreme, so when he was killed, no soldier stood up to help him. The woman was silent for a long time, and then said softly, "Forget it, it's already in the past." Don't mention it. Cremont showed a helpless look, and then seemed to think of something, and said, "Sir, you must be careful of one person." "Who?" "Raphael." "How come? I've never heard of him." "You should know that Leger has a good relationship with a mercenary group. It said that when he was in danger, it was this mercenary group that saved him," Cremont said in a low voice. "Raphael is the leader of this mercenary group." The woman paused for a moment. "He's a magician. Not only a magician, but also a puppeteer, a priest, and a warrior." "That's impossible," the woman said in surprise. "Sir, it's the truth," Cremont said. "And he's very smart. I've never heard Lang Ning praise a person so much." "Just because of the praise?" "Sir," Cremont suddenly closed his mouth and stepped back quickly. A silent arrow came out from the side and hit his shoulder. If he hadn't stepped back, the arrow would have been stuck in his chest. But at the same time, a shiny dagger appeared behind Cremonti's neck. The dagger was extremely fast, and Cremonti's retreating speed was not slow either. As a result, before he could react, the dagger had already pierced deeply into his neck. Cremonti's eyes suddenly became slack. He had already pulled out half of his sword, but it suddenly fell back, and his body softly fell down. Enemy attack. The dozens of black shadows drew out their weapons at the same time. A wooden giant appeared out of nowhere, opened its arms, and rushed towards the crowd. Behind the wooden giant was Han Jin with a murderous look. Morrison's rushed out from another place with his sword, but his behavior today was a little strange. He gritted his teeth and didn't say anything. If it was in the past, he would have shouted. It seemed that he had learned his lesson. If he wanted to fight, he wanted to fight. If he wanted to kill, he wanted to kill. Less nonsense. Han Jin, Morrison's, and Leger all fought in close quarters, but their styles were different. Morrison's was actually not slow, but he was not as fast as the other two. His specialty was his strength and his dazzling fighting power. On the other hand, Leger's body was like a ghost. He floated in the air, and his speed was extremely fast and tricky. He never made any slashing movements. The dagger in his hand was just a stab, and even a slight touch could take away a life. Han Jin's speed was not as fast as Leger's, and his strength was not as strong as Morrison's, but his efficiency was the highest. The wooden giant in front of him was unobstructed. It blocked the opponent's attack, attracted the opponent's attention, and blocked the opponent's vision. Then, Han Jin would close in, and with a single punch, blood would splatter out. Morrison's and Leger had to take care of the opponent's desperation, so that both sides would not be injured. Han Jin, on the other hand, was very relaxed. As long as the opponent could not destroy the wooden giant in an instant, his attacks would not miss. The short female soldier took a few steps back. No one knew what she had done, but a white fog of light suddenly appeared and enveloped her body. Han Jin and the others sensed that something was wrong and changed their direction at the same time, rushing toward the fog of light. Sunir's arrow, Morrison's fighting power, and Han Jin's wooden giant all passed through the fog, but they all missed. The short female warrior had already disappeared. Spatial scroll? Damn it. Morrison's, who had already made up his mind not to talk nonsense, broke the rule again. Leger's body suddenly twisted, and he dodged a sword that was coming down at him. He swung his dagger backward. This time, he attacked with hatred. The sharp dagger almost cut the warrior's neck. He did not expect, nor did anyone expect, that the other party would have a spatial scroll. This ambush was a complete failure. The woman in the field screamed and ran desperately into the forest. A mud wall appeared out of nowhere, and the woman was knocked back a few steps. She fell to the ground with her face facing the sky. Sasu walked out of the forest with a bitter smile. His mission was to kill the escapees, but who would have thought that he would only end up intercepting the most useless person? To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 122. After cleaning up the battlefield, everyone was in low spirits. They had to think about it seriously. Strategically, it was right to look down on the enemy, but tactically, they had to pay attention to the enemy. No wonder mages had a higher status than warriors of the same level. The 10th grade mage Woodrow was not here, but the influence he radiated could still determine the life and death of some people. Borg used the magic staff Woodrow made for him to kill Morrison's in an instant, and then the female warrior used a magic scroll to escape, leaving them disappointed. There was also the matter of spies in the army. They had to think carefully about countermeasures. If they were too strict, it would be bad for the morale of the army. If they were too lax, then they would no longer have any secrets. Lang Ning was very busy. On one hand, he had to prepare for the expedition, and on the other hand, he had to contact the other generals of Riptide. On the other hand, Leger wanted to pull some people from a military law team to form a separate organization to deal with potential spies. Leger was not interested in military affairs, but he showed a certain degree of enthusiasm for this kind of thing. In comparison, Han Jin and the others were very relaxed. Those who were practicing swordsmanship did so, those who were meditating did so, and those who were secretly eating magic crystals ate as much as they could. One day, a soldier suddenly came to report that the castellan of the west side of the city, Winston, had arrived. Logically, Han Jin, Leger, and the others should have gone out to join the fun. However, the soldier reported that there was a person with an imposing aura beside Winston. It was a knight in heavy armor. Even the horses that were jumping around would avoid him when they saw him. Han Jin immediately thought of someone, Gerald. Now, no one dared to go out. It was not that they were afraid of Gerald. If thousands of knights swarmed him, he would be exhausted to death, but it was not necessary. The current situation was very complicated. Killing Gerald would only benefit Zagund and Woodrow. Han Jin's goal was to maintain the balance between them and let them continue to fight. Moreover, Everyone's view of this bloody knight with a bad reputation had changed. Sunia used to hate Gerald because she had heard about his deeds. However, on that day, Gerald's imposing aura was fascinating. Facing the vampires that came like a dark cloud, he looked disdainfully and fearlessly. He held up the defense line of the west side of the city with only one person and one spear. That was a fierce battle. The cavalry brigade also received the battle report. Gerald was not only cruel to his enemies, but also to himself. At the most critical moment, he was besieged by a group of vampires, including the Ghost King Caroline. He was wounded several times, but he still refused to retreat. It was all because of Gerald that the governor of the west side of the city, Winston, was able to rebuild the defense line in a hurry and finally defeat the vampires. It was hard to deny that it was hard to find a completely evil person in the world. Even a butcher like Gerald had his shining points. It was said that after the vampires were defeated, the west side of the city was filled with cheers. Countless soldiers, including the residents of the west side of the city, regarded Gerald as their hero. Even in Gerald's hometown, the Holy Crown City, people were afraid of Gerald. Who would have thought that he would become a hero in people's hearts after he came to the west side of the Bite Man City as an emissary? Sometimes things in the world were so funny. It was a pity that no one knew what Gerald was thinking at that time. Was he stunned? Did he not know whether to laugh or cry? Or was he moved? However, Winston came and left quickly. He only exchanged a few words with Lang Ning, checked the military supplies, and then left the camp in a hurry. Han Jin was confused at first. Was Lang Ning so trustworthy? But soon he figured it out. Since Woodrow could plant his own people in Riptide, how could Winston not do anything? He must have his own people in the army. He must have known about these things long ago. He came to the camp just to verify it himself. The sun rose and set, and the moon waxed and waned. The ninth town became more and more lively. Troops came from afar and were stationed around the ninth town. Han Jin and the others could not get involved in some things. Now the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Battalion were familiar with them, but the soldiers of other troops would inevitably feel disgusted, especially the generals. They could obey Leger and Lang Ning, but if Han Jin wanted to stand in front of them and give orders, it would be very unpleasant. Therefore, Han Jin never asked about the affairs of the army. As long as Lang Ning was there would be no trouble. He put all his energy into cultivation. At the beginning, he could only absorb dozens of yuan of energy a day. But now, the energy he absorbed every day was calculated in terms of armor, which was thousands of times more than before. During these days, he had absorbed more than half of the more than 500 level 3 magic crystals of Earth element. The inconspicuous black raven magic crystals had all been used up, so there was a space in the space ring. But he did not make the 5 ghosts carrying spell. Just like he wanted to accumulate all the fire elements to make the 3 true fire charm, he hoped to release more advanced dark magic in the future. Now, he still had 2 magical crystals of the Earth Bear and 2 magical crystals of the Tree Demon in his spatial ring. Although they were all Earth-type magical crystals, they were still relics of magical beasts of the 8th rank. There was too much energy in them. Even though he had reached the Great Foundation establishment and entered the Xian realm, he still had to practice for a long time before he could absorb them. What was left were 3 magic crystals of the Flash Leopard, 2 magic crystals of the Giant Lizard, and more than 40 magic crystals of the Gale Wolf. Looking at these, Han Jin could not help but think of those cute bulls. Without their selfless help, he could not have accumulated so many things. However, facts had proven that relying on self-reliance would never make one rich. What was the best way? Doing business or plundering? Han Jin had done business before. In a deep underground city, a small piece of horse meat could be exchanged for 1 or even several magic crystals. How much could a few people get after hunting hard in the forest? In the underground city, he had exchanged for more than 300 level 6 fire element magic crystals and more than 60 level 6 water element magic crystals. The former had to work hard every day, while the latter was as easy as blowing off dust. Han Jin found a problem that he had to face. Among these magic crystals, The worst magic crystal of the Gale Wolf was level 5, and he could not absorb them yet. When the remaining 200 level 3 earth element magic crystals were used up, he would run out of food. He walked out the door, turned left, and came to a room. He knocked a few times, and without waiting for the person inside to speak, he pushed the door open and walked in. It was a little impolite, but he was used to it, because even if he was polite to someone, they would still look at him strangely. Inside, Sunir and Lang Ning were sitting opposite each other, whispering something. Han Jin smiled apologetically and turned to leave. Sunir called out, "Raphael, you talk. I'll come to you later." "Lord Raphael, we've finished talking." Lang Ning smiled. "Actually, it's nothing much. Our army will set off in a few days, so I came to ask Lord Sunir about the situation in Black Raven City." "How do you know about the situation in Black Raven City?" Han Jin asked in surprise. Even a wise man would make mistakes. Han Jin's words sounded reasonable, but after thinking about it carefully, it was a little confusing. Was it more important that the army set off in a few days? Or was it more important that Sunir knew about the situation in Black Raven City? "Where do we meet for the first time?" Sunir rolled her eyes at Han Jin. Han Jin suddenly remembered the scene where Sunir was chased by countless black crows. Later, she also explained that she went to Black Raven City to find a friend. "Ah, I remember now. Then I won't disturb you." Lang Ning stood up with a smile, nodded to Han Jin and Sunir, and walked out. Looking at Han Jin, who sat down with a smile, Sunir couldn't help but feel a little bitter. She didn't dislike Han Jin, but she didn't like him either. She just had a good impression of him and was curious about him. Han Jin's appearance was very handsome in a human world, but compared to the elves, he was very ordinary. Therefore, Sunir didn't care about his appearance. She thought that Han Jin was very smart, but not scheming. He treated his companions with sincerity. He had a sense of justice, but was not pedantic. When he could save people, he would help, and when he should kill, he would not hesitate. In fact, in this troubled world, it was already very good that he could trust, take care of his companions, and never betray them. Especially that day, when they were surrounded by the night of the Holy Crown City. Han Jin insisted on staying and let them go first. She still couldn't forget that lonely and stubborn back of Han Jin. Although she knew later that he could escape, his back was engraved in her heart, and that was why she liked him. As for her curiosity, it was easy to understand. The magic released by Han Jin was so perfect that she had never heard of such magic in the world. She had asked Stilberg several times about Han Jin's past, but Stilberg just kept smirking and didn't say anything. When she was pushed, he would yell and ask Sunir to ask him herself. Sunir couldn't do anything about it. However, curiosity was the most important thing between a man and a woman. Only curiosity could arouse interest, and only with interest could the future be created. It was hard to imagine what kind of story could happen between a man and a woman who didn't even have the slightest curiosity about him. Unfortunately, Sunir didn't understand this. However, in this small team, everyone's attitude was somewhat inexplicable. For example, Lang Ning. Did he need to explain what he was doing here? Thinking of this, Sunir felt a little angry. Because of her affection and curiosity, she didn't reject Han Jin. Because of her character and identity, she wouldn't take the initiative to do anything or to make someone happy. To break this situation, only Han Jin could take the initiative. But Han Jin seemed to be too careless. If it didn't mean anything else, why did he do those embarrassing things that were full of ambiguity in the eyes of others? If he had that kind of intention, why didn't he ask her to go out or buy her a small gift? Sunir certainly wouldn't covet those things. She just did it for a feeling. "What's the matter?" Sunir asked softly. She was already prepared. As long as Han Jin expressed his feelings seriously, even if it was very subtle, she would give Han Jin a chance. This man was very good in all aspects. He was responsible. His strength was probably the weakest among the elite members, but he always tried to protect others. He was ambitious. At least, Sunir had never thought of becoming a lord. He was smart. The current situation was created by Han Jin. He had many other advantages. Most importantly, he had a future. When she shared that secret with him, she already knew that as long as Han Jin was given time, his future would be unimaginably strong. Of course, Han Jin also had his shortcomings. He would always go to the bar with Morrison's. But all men were the same. She just needed to take care of him and change his bad habits. Sunir's face suddenly turned red. What was she thinking? Fortunately, under the cover of the mask, no one could see that she was different. It's like this. Han Jin smiled. My magic crystals are almost used up. So be it. What does it have to do with me? Sunir was extremely disappointed. She couldn't help but say coldly. Han Jin was stunned. I've been coding until 3 o'clock. I really can't do it anymore. I'll make up for it tomorrow. Please forgive me. But it should be today. Chapter 123. With a bang, the door closed in front of Han Jin. He was stunned for a moment, then helplessly turned around and saw Morrison's, Sisu, and the others smiling at him. Which one of you made Sunir angry today? Han Jin asked with a frown. Actually, it was normal for friends to have some unhappiness because of a moment of carelessness or carelessness. However, it was quite depressing for him to be implicated. No. Morrison's shook his head in surprise. No? Then why did it become like this? Han Jin pointed at the closed door. Did you make her angry? Morrison's yelled. I only said one sentence to her. How could I make her angry? And we were talking about something serious. Han Jin said. Moxink winked at Han Jin. Although he was smart, he always did stupid things. But if he was stupid, he should be the first one to catch Han Jin's faulty wording. So you always talked about improper things with her before? Moxink asked. F***ck off. Han Jin said angrily. If Sunir heard this, he would be in trouble. TSK. Morrison's smacked his lips. He wanted to say something, but Han Jin did look angry, so he could only swallow his words. At this moment, Stillberg walked in from outside. Han Jin was eager to change the topic, so he waved his hand and signaled for Stillberg to come over. Young master, what's the matter? Stillberg's face lit up as soon as he saw Han Jin. Han Jin suddenly froze. In the past year, he rarely cared about Stillberg. It was not that he had forgotten about the relationship between the master and servant, but that he should have focused on his own cultivation and the relationships between the elite members. Moreover, they were going through one crisis after another, so he did not have time to think too much. Looking back, he clearly remembered the scene of Stillberg begging for a piece of bread, kneeling on the ground like a dog. He could not help but feel ashamed. He then asked gently, Stillberg, haven't you been learning magic from Sasso? How is it now? Stillberg could not help but look at Sasso. He did not know how to answer. Raphael, are you kidding? Sasso smiled bitterly. What's wrong? He only learned meditation techniques from me, and also learned how to release small fireballs. After that, he never looked for me again. Sasso said slowly, do you think that with a ready-made teacher like you, he still has a need to learn from others? Han Jin was stunned. He understood the meaning behind Sassu's words. If they were both learning magic, then should he learn normal magic from Sassu, or should he learn the extremely special magic from Han Jin? This was a very simple question. Anyone with a brain would not choose the former. Moreover, Morrison's and the others often talked about Han Jin and praised Han Jin's magic. Stillberg's ears were getting calluses from hearing it. You want to learn magic from me? Han Jin smiled. Stillberg looked at Han Jin timidly. After a long while, he finally gathered his courage and nodded. Come with me, young master, Stillberg said with a trembling voice. Seeing Han Jin like this, he could not believe that his dream had come true. What are you waiting for? Come with me. With tears bursting out of his eyes, Stillberg was so happy that he almost fainted. He hurriedly followed Han Jin. He agreed just like that. Morrison's looked at the backs of Han Jin and Stillberg, and suddenly patted Sassu's shoulder. Sasso, I want to learn magic from you too. You want to learn magic? Are you crazy? You're so stupid. I can learn for a few days, and then like today we... Spare me. Sassu smiled bitterly and interrupted Morrison's. You think Raphael will care about you? That's none of your business. Are you going to help me? Go away. While Moxink and Cessation were quarreling, Han Jin had taken Stillberg into his room. Although they met every day, they always talked about trivial things, and it was always Steelberg who took the initiative, such as, "Young master, it's time for dinner. Your robe is dirty. Take it off. Please go to bed later. I haven't lit the fireplace yet." And Han Jin hardly cared about Steelberg's well-being, because he was always busy doing something important. "Young master, it's time for dinner. Young master, your robe is dirty. Take it off. Young master, you can sleep later. I haven't lit the fireplace yet." To Han Jin, his priority was to protect himself and his companions. He wanted to establish a foothold in this world as much as possible. To Steelberg, Han Jin was his master. He was the meaning of his existence. Ever since he started learning how to speak, the environment around him had been instilling a kind of thought into him. Loyalty had already merged with his soul. "Sit here." Han Jin pointed at a chair. Steelberg sat down and looked at Han Jin eagerly. Han Jin pondered for a moment and reached out to grab Steelberg's wrist. However, Steelberg's heart was beating too fast, like a drum. Han Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why are you so nervous?" "Relax, relax." "Young master, I'm already very relaxed," Steelberg whispered. Han Jin said helplessly, "How about this? Don't you know how to meditate? Start meditating now. I also need to think about where to start teaching you." "Understood, young master." Steelberg nodded vigorously. Seeing Steelberg close his eyes and meditate seriously, Han Jin suddenly realized that he had agreed too quickly. Should he teach him how to eat and cultivate? Actually, it wasn't impossible. However, there were some key points that he simply couldn't explain to Steelberg. For example, the circulation of the sky, the acupoints, and the artistic conception. If he couldn't even explain these basic knowledge, how could he let him cultivate? Steelberg didn't know what Han Jin was thinking at the moment. Although he looked like he was meditating, he was actually very excited. After such a long time, the young master had changed from an unknown and destitute little aristocrat to the current Raphael. Steelberg had seen all the changes and unfamiliarity. However, in his heart, the young master would always be the same young master. No matter if he was destitute or rich, weak or sick, or able to resist an army of thousands, one thing would never change. Raphael was Steelberg's young master forever. However, the only thing that made Steelberg sad was that the young master had never mentioned those changes to him. This made him feel like he was being excluded by the young master. The others had asked him more than once where the young master had learned his skills from, but he had always vaguely brushed them off. In fact, Steelberg knew that the young master really didn't know anything in the past. That kind of begging life, Steelberg hadn't forgotten until now. But so what? "I will never tell anyone about the young master's decadent days," Steelberg said in his heart. Now, the young master was finally going to teach him magic. This was a secret that the young master had never shared with anyone. Thinking of this, Steelberg couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. Han Jin pondered for a long time, but still gave up the idea of teaching his own cultivation method to Steelberg. Instead, he picked out a set of introductory foundational cultivation method from his memory that was easier to learn. As long as Steelberg could seriously practice according to this method, after his body had the true essence, it would be much easier to use the talismans he made. At present, this was the only way. Han Jin clearly knew that once the things he knew were leaked out, it would have a great impact in this world. Whether the impact was good or bad, it wasn't something that Han Jin wanted to see at present. Calling Steelberg, who was thinking nonsense, Han Jin carefully imparted the cultivation method to him. For example, the meridians, Han Jin could only explain it as the channels through which the sacred elements moved in the body. During this time, Steelberg also had doubts. He knew about the elements, but what was the sacred elements? Of course, he didn't dare to ask. Whatever the young master taught him, it must be something good. Whatever, as long as he followed the young master's instructions, everything would be fine. Regardless of Steelberg's perseverance and constitution, on this first day, he showed a kind of fanaticism. He even forgot whose room he was in, just closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. Outside the room, the curious Morrisons and Sassu hadn't left yet. They casually leaned against the wooden pillars and whispered to each other. Little Joseph also came to the yard, occasionally glancing at Han Jin's room. Because of his age, little Joseph was not scheming. His thoughts were shown on his face. "Come here." When little Joseph passed by the yard for the fourth time, Morrison's waved his hand. Little Joseph hurried to Morrison's. Morrison's looked him up and down and said softly, "You also want to learn Raphael's magic?" Little Joseph was a little flustered. "Think about it. Didn't you always want to learn swordsmanship? No one taught you back then. What's wrong with you now? Are you looking down on warriors? Are you sure you have the potential to learn magic?" Morrison's said in a muffled voice, "Don't be too greedy. Just learn swordsmanship from me." Speaking of a relationship between Han Jin and Stillberg, Morrison's was the one who knew best. It was normal that Han Jin was willing to teach Stillberg magic, but it was almost impossible that little Joseph wanted to learn it too. Little Joseph was disappointed at first, but Morrison's next words had a big impact on him. Greedy. He didn't know anything. Everyone took care of him like a child. No one had ever asked him to do anything. Little Joseph's face reddened at the thought. His eyes became clear again, and he said seriously, "Morrison's University, bro, I understand. Today was too uncomfortable. My head was heavy, and I couldn't get up during the day. I apologize to everyone. I will do it if I can, but I really can't today. I can't continue writing the next chapter." Chapter 124. Riptide originally had 8 cavalry brigades and 22 infantry brigades. Among them, 6 cavalry brigades and 15 infantry brigades had arrived at Ninth Town, which accounted for more than 2/3 of the total force. The other generals were still nowhere to be seen, which meant that they would not come. There was no point in waiting any longer. Lang Ning, the most popular general, gave a speech to motivate the crowd. He first focused on the vampire's evil deeds, and then pointed his finger at Zagun's nest, Black Raven City. Since the Bite Man split, it had never waged a war. Of course, no one had come to bully them. This time, the Bite Man was full of pent-up anger. Lang Ning's speech caused thunderous cheers. Looking at the scene from afar, Han Jin suddenly thought of something. Perhaps the Knight of Conrad was not as pure as everyone thought. Before his death, he had delegated his power to the brigade captains and divided the army into brigades to be stationed in different places. This had caused a great deal of trouble for the commanders, as they could not gather military power. Several years after Conrad's death, Leger had been able to summon most of the army to Ninth Town in his own name. Conrad's division had played a decisive role. It was known that the Knight of Conrad had given the power to the brigade captains. If they wanted to maintain their legitimacy and refuse to hand over their power, then they had to uphold the honor of the Knight of Conrad first. As long as Conrad was still alive, everything they had done was right. At least they could give the soldiers an explanation. Moreover, Conrad's division of the army had ensured that the brigade captains could use their power to the fullest. Therefore, when Leger issued the call, no matter what they thought, they had to come. Denying Leger was the same as denying Conrad and their legitimacy. Rather than being forced to hand over their power in the future, they might as well try their luck in Ninth Town first. Of course, these were all heart-wrenching words. Some of the generals were straightforward. As soon as they heard that Leger and Lang Ning were summoning the soldiers, they immediately rushed over with their subordinates. As the saying went, it was easier to invite the devil than to send him away. The 4 castellans of the Bite Man were very supportive of Leger and Lang Ning's decision. Leger had established his own faction. If such a person stayed in the Bite Man, he would eventually become an unstable factor. Sending him out to attack Black Raven City would put pressure on Zagund and relieve their worries. It was like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. In fact, the speeches on the stage were just for show. They had already reached a consensus or compromise with the generals and the 4 castellans. The fact that the castellans had already prepared a large number of supplies for the expedition was proof of that. At noon, the army finally left Ninth Town. Lang Ning led 4 cavalry brigades to open the way in the front. Behind them was the middle army composed of infantry brigades. Behind them were 2 cavalry brigades and 2 infantry brigades protecting the supplies. It was said that when there were more than 10,000 people, there was no end to it. Lang Ning's vanguard had already traveled more than 10 miles, but the supplies behind them were still in the town. More than 20 days later, the army was close to the border of Black Raven City. Out of caution, Lang Ning ordered the troops to camp and then sent hundreds of knights to enter Black Raven City for a careful investigation. Han Jin and the others stopped at the edge of the woods. They didn't want to mingle with the army because it was too inconvenient. This was a war, not a sightseeing tour. Therefore, Lang Ning was very strict with the soldiers, and even they were restrained. If they disobeyed the military discipline, no one could do anything to them. However, Lang Ning would lose face. If they obeyed the military discipline, the barracks would become hell. For example, they could only hide in their own tents after eating. If they walked around the barracks for no reason, it would be against the military discipline. Wouldn't it suffocate them to death? Michel jumped off the giant tortoise and looked around for dry wood. He had now become a full-time cook for Han Jin and the others. Stillberg accompanied Michel for a while, then hid in a corner and closed his eyes to rest. During these days, Stillberg had shown unprecedented enthusiasm. As long as he was free, he would find a remote corner and sit in a strange posture. What's wrong with Stillberg these days? Sunir couldn't help but be curious. Although Han Jin was the most qualified person to answer this question, Sunir was too embarrassed to ask Han Jin a few days ago. When she asked this question, she didn't even look at Han Jin. "You should ask Raphael this question," said Morrisons, winking at her. Sunir was a little embarrassed. She glared at Morrisons and said, "I didn't ask you." Han Jin wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. He thought to himself that Sunir also had such a feminine side. Raphael taught his magic to Stillberg. Didn't you know? Sassu played the role of the good guy in time. Otherwise, Sunir would have flipped out in a while. Sunir couldn't help but look at Han Jin. Because of their different experiences, their perspectives were also different. From Morrison's and Sassu's point of view, Stillberg was just lucky. Everyone knew how amazing Han Jin's magic was. However, Sunir had been in the military for a long time. She had already realized the importance of this. If even an ordinary person like Stillberg could learn Han Jin's magic, then how terrifying would an army of people with special magic be? "Raphael, can everyone learn magic from you?" Sunir finally broke the silence between them. "No." Han Jin hurriedly shook his head. Not to mention here, even in the other world, magic couldn't be taught without restrictions. What a pity. Sunir sighed softly. "What's there to be sorry about? Do you want to learn magic too?" Morrisons asked. At this moment, Han Jin suddenly laughed. "Do you want to come out by yourself? Or do you want me to drag you out?" Everyone was stunned. Then they saw Leger's figure appear out of thin air. He asked in surprise, "How did you find me?" "Look behind you." Behind me. Leger looked back at the grass he walked through and shrugged. "Leger, you're the commander-in-chief. What are you doing here?" Morrisons asked. "It's too boring. I'm the commander-in-chief, so I have to set an example. I'm bored out of my mind." Leger smiled bitterly. "By the way, I have something to discuss with you." "What is it?" Lang Ning has set Black Raven City's Nuremberg as the target of the first battle. Leger took out a map, spread it on the ground, and pointed. "This is Nuremberg, about 25 kilometers away from us. Nuremberg is the 3rd largest city in Zagund territory. If we can occupy it, it will have a great impact. Zagund is notorious. Although the soldiers are willing to attack Black Raven City with us, they are still afraid. We need to find a way to raise their morale." "You mean we're going to attack Nuremberg?" Morrisons asked. "No, I'm not crazy." Leger smiled. "We're just going to scout. I just saw a lot of knights going to the border. Aren't they going to scout? They can't enter Nuremberg." Leger shook his head. "Will Lang Ning allow you to take risks?" Han Jin asked curiously. "He can't control me." Leger smiled. "I don't think it's dangerous. The most dangerous person in Black Raven City is Zagund, followed by the 2 vampire kings, Caroline and Betty. But they've all gone to the underground city. The rest of them won't be a threat to us. It's been more than 20 days since we set out, right?" Sassu said. "I think Zagund already knows we're going to attack Black Raven City. Will he do anything and let us occupy it? I agree with Ronning. It's not that Zaganide doesn't want to do it, but he can't. Protecting the underground city is his priority, Sunir said. I disagree. Sasu shook his head. You think too highly of Zagund. I think he'll at least give a try. Since Zagund became the Lord, he's been waging wars. No one can really threaten Zagund's Black Raven City. Can you guarantee that Zagund doesn't have other hidden forces? War is not a legend. Sunir said, if Zagund really has other armies, he would have used them long ago. What's the point of keeping them? But Sasu continued to argue. Both of you have a point. Leger hurriedly said, so we have to sneak into Nuremberg and investigate carefully before making a decision. Let's do this. Han Jin said slowly. You all stay here and give me the map. I'll go to Nuremberg tonight. I'll be back before dusk tomorrow. How can you do that? Leger was really anxious. If he let Han Jin go alone, wouldn't it mean that he was forcing Han Jin to volunteer? Why can't I? If you want to go, we'll go together. Morrison said, do you think we're going to a bar? Han Jin stared at Morrison's. No matter what happens, I can take care of myself. If you all go, I can't guarantee anything. Morrison's was stunned. Han Jin's words made sense. If they went together, they could only fight their way out in case of an accident. Han Jin would have more freedom if he went alone. At least he could use his special magic to escape. Raphael, I'm a real thief. You hurt my self-esteem. Leger smiled bitterly. Well, you don't have to argue. Wait for my news tomorrow. Han Jin smiled. Chapter 125. Han Jin had thought that Black Raven City would be very desolate, but after seeing it with his own eyes, he realized that he was wrong. What other places had, Black Raven City also had. The only difference was that the sky here was very dark. No sun or bright stars could be seen. No matter when he raised his head, he could only see layers of lead-like clouds. At most, there were some differences in color. Around the towering castle, there were neat wheat fields. Han Jin felt very strange. Normally, the lack of sunlight was very unfavorable to the growth of plants. Why was the wheat here still flourishing? Unfortunately, now was not the time to study botany. His body slowly sank down. Not long after, Han Jin came out from a clump of withered grass. It was obviously a cell. The air was foul and rancid. There was a closed iron door in front of him and a solid iron window behind him. A man of unknown age was nailed to the wall. It was nailed, not hung. 2 iron nails as thick as a child's arm had penetrated the man's palms and were deeply embedded in the wall. The man's hands were spread out and fixed in the shape of the word. Strangely, his palms were not bleeding. The muscles of his palms had turned grayish-black, and there were a few white dots moving around. Han Jin fixed his eyes on them, and his expression changed. Those white dots were actually maggots. Just as Han Jin came out, the man also raised his head. However, Han Jin still could not see his face clearly. His hair and beard were too long, tangled together on his face and body, making him look like a hairy monkey. The only thing that could be seen clearly was a pair of eyes as sharp as knives. But in a flash, the eyes changed and became extraordinarily turbid and unfocused, like a poor and dying old man curled up on the street, staring blankly at the sky. Shoo! Han Jin put his index finger in front of his lips. He was about to walk towards the iron door when suddenly an ear-piercing scream came in, startling Han Jin. He was here to spy on the enemy, so he was already mentally prepared to deal with accidents. He should not have been startled by anything, but that scream was too weird and ear-piercing. Han Jin leaned against the iron door and listened, then casually flicked a black beetle out. Soon he saw a shocking scene. At the end of the corridor outside the prison cell, there was a large iron table. A coquettish woman, almost naked, was lying on the table like a dog. A strong man, even taller than Morrison's, was standing behind the woman, lashing her with a long whip. Every time he lashed her, she would let out a sharp scream. All male creatures would instinctively observe something at this moment, and Han Jin was no exception. The woman was only wearing a pair of soft leather boots, a belt around her waist, and a long sword hanging by the belt. Other than that, there was nothing else. Was she a prison guard? She was the heroine of a romantic wrestling film. Moreover, she was a top-grade heroine with a coquettish appearance, white skin, long hair, and a curvaceous figure. She was extremely attractive. The man's movements became faster and faster, and the woman's cries became louder and louder. Finally, she let out a long trill, and her body twitched rhythmically. Her hands slammed on the metal table, and the man let out a strange laugh. Han Jin was speechless. He turned around blankly. The prisoner saw Han Jin's shocked expression and said in a low voice, "That's the abyssal siren." What? Han Jin was stunned. That's the abyssal siren. What they like to do most is to be beaten and ravaged. They are very strong, second only to vampires among the abyssal creatures. They are beautiful and not inferior to elves. 100 abyssal sirens are enough to satisfy the desires of 10,000 soldiers. But conversely, 10,000 soldiers may not be able to satisfy the desires of 100 abyssal sirens. The prisoner's voice sounded very old. Oh, people say that Zagund is a criminal, but in fact they have wronged him. Zagund and his soldiers are only responsible for destruction. They never do anything else. Han Jin stared at the prisoner blankly, unable to say a word. What? Are you surprised because I know too much? The prisoner asked in a self-deprecating tone. No, I'm surprised because you can still laugh at this moment. Han Jin knew that he had accidentally met a big shot. He didn't want to disturb the residents of Nuremberg, and he couldn't get any valuable information from them. So he set his goal in the prison. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. In this spirit, he thought that it would be easier to find like-minded people in the prison. Unexpectedly, he met a man who talked and experienced unusual things. So what if you don't laugh? Cry? The prisoner said slowly. Are you from the Bite Man? Or the Holy Crown City? Are you ready to attack Black Raven City? Han Jin couldn't describe his surprise in words. He looked the prisoner up and down and whispered, Who are you? How do you know? Ever since I failed to assassinate Zaganide, he would come to visit me every once in a while. I haven't seen him for many days now. I can't believe he gave up on this pleasure. He must be very busy, right? When the prisoner mentioned Zagund, his tone suddenly became cold. And you, a little guy, even dare to come here, regardless of the threat of the Dark Ward. Do you know that Zagund and Caroline are definitely not in Nuremberg? Little guy. Han Jin smiled. He always disliked people who took advantage of their seniority, not to mention that he was on the stronger side, so he didn't need to give face to anyone. I'm also a human being, and I'm over 70 years old. Is it too much to call you a little guy? Well, sir, how did you know that we were going to attack Black Raven City? Han Jin smiled. Since the prisoner mentioned his age, he didn't continue to argue. Black Raven City is not a good place. Even caravans rarely appear here. What are you doing here? Seeking death? I rarely see unfamiliar faces here. Your appearance is very sudden, and I could tell at first glance that you are sneaky. You don't have any good intentions. Also, Zaganide has been missing for a long time, so I'm just guessing. The prisoner said in a low voice, Little guy, do you have time? Talk to me about what happened outside. At the end of his sentence, there was a hint of pleading in the prisoner's tone. Don't you think I should save you first? That's not necessary. I've been locked up here for 10 years. My fighting strength and body have already begun to wither. Even if you save me, I'll be a cripple. It'll only alarm those guys. The prisoner sighed softly. As long as you can talk to me about the outside world, I'll be very grateful. What do you want to know? He didn't expect that such a simple question would stun the prisoner. His hair and beard trembled slightly. After stammering for a long time, he finally squeezed out a long sigh. 10 years. By the way, I still don't know your name. Do you have any family or friends? Hanji knew very well that Zagund valued this prisoner so much. This prisoner's background was definitely not simple. Forget it. I suddenly don't want to ask anything. The prisoner said in a bitter voice. Little guy, let's talk about you. Where are you from? Can you change the way you address me? I feel a little uncomfortable. Han Jin frowned. He remembered that he used to call the little bull little guy. It would be strange if he felt comfortable hearing the same address now. My name is Raphael. Well, Mr. Raphael, where are you from? What are you doing here? I'm from the Bite Man. Bite Man? How did the Bite Man have the power to attack Black Raven City? Was it Conrad who led Riptide to attack? No, Knight of Conrad. The Knight of Conrad died of illness 2 years ago. Han Jin was stunned. Do you know him? How old was he? Just over 40? How could he die of illness? The prisoner asked in a shocked tone. Because he was too tired. The prisoner fell into silence. After a long while, he let out a long sigh, which was full of sorrow. However, his hair and beard were as good as a mask, so Han Jin couldn't see his expression clearly. So, Mr. Raphael, you came to Nuremberg to destroy the city's defense? I'm not that powerful yet. I'm just here to scout, Han Jin said. Scout? By the way, I saw you come out of the ground. Was that magic? Han Jin smiled, but did not answer. If you have such an ability, everything will be simple. Most of the soldiers here are from the Abyss race. They are not afraid of attacks from underground, so they built the defense magic array underground. The prisoner narrowed his eyes and looked out of the iron window. Do you see the huge statue in the center of the city? It's empty down there. You can go there and try to find a way. But you'd better wait until the army arrives. Otherwise, you can't destroy the magic array alone. Even if you destroy it, they can fix it. Are you familiar with Nuremberg? Very familiar? Ha! I know every corner of the city, well, even if I close my eyes. I've been observing from outside for a long time and found that the defense of Nuremberg is not very tight, Han Jin said. Sir, how many soldiers do you think it will take to take down Nuremberg? That's not important. What's important is that you're sure Zagund, Caroline, and Betty are not in Black Raven City. They're definitely not here. Even if they know what happened here, they can't come back in time. Then it's easy. If you could destroy the magic array, thousands of soldiers can take down Nuremberg. Oh, Han Jin glanced at the prisoner. I'm leaving. Sir, are you sure you don't need my help? No, little guy. No, Mr. Raphael, you care about me, which proves that you have a good heart. But it's not a good thing. Chapter 127. When Riptide was about 20 miles away from Nuremberg, it was discovered. Although Zagund had taken away millions of black crows, there were still less than 1,000 black crows left near Nuremberg, but they were more than enough to serve as sentries. Nuremberg immediately entered a state of combat readiness. The gate was closed, and groups of soldiers rushed to the city wall. A dark beam of light rose from the center of the city and flew hundreds of meters into the air. Then, as if it had hit something, it splashed in all directions and turned into a visible light curtain that covered the whole city. The army of Nuremberg was full of all kinds of monsters. Only a small part of the army was human soldiers. The main force was made up of groups of short, stooped humanoid creatures. Their faces were full of wrinkles, and their eyes could not be seen. However, they had surprisingly large noses, from which a sticky liquid kept flowing, which was very disgusting. Their status should be very low. Not only did the Minotaurs scold them, but the human soldiers also treated them very badly. In addition to the warriors, there were hundreds of jellyfish-like creatures on the city wall. They were chirping and lined up in neat rows, ready to meet the attack of the Riptide Regiment. These monsters were noisier than ducks. Their noises easily drowned out the roars of the torrents. Han Jin already knew that those monsters belonged to the Abyss race, Evil Eyes. They attacked their opponents by shooting light from their eyes. They were similar to human archers, but their basic strength was much stronger than ordinary archers. In this world, the status of humans was not high. An evil eye, even if it was the laziest evil eye, had the power equivalent to a 4th or 5th step professional. Humans had to go through hard training to become qualified warriors and mages. The starting point was too low. It was undeniable that this was a tragedy. But then again, it was precisely because the starting point was too low that humans would diligently seek and struggle. Only with pressure would there be motivation. Humans were able to grow stronger from a weak race. This unyielding heart had played a decisive role in this. Lang Ning was not in a hurry to attack. First, he reorganized his troops. Then, in a deafening roar, several huge white balls of light rose from the ground, whistled across the sky, and hit the defensive enchantment of Nuremberg. The black light curtain twisted crazily. The defending troops on the city wall did not expect the enemy to have such a powerful weapon. They were shaken and screamed. Han Jin quietly poked his head out from behind a huge statue and looked at the monsters below. This was a magnificent underground palace. In the center, there was a 2-meter wide and 10-meter high crystal pillar. On the corundum floor around the crystal pillar, there were countless strange magic runes. There were 8 areas in total, and in the center of each area, there was a magic crystal inlaid. Streams of black light flowed into the crystal pillar like water, and then rushed up to the sky. Next to the magic circle, several solemn-looking female demons were busy. They were not abyss sirens. Every time they opened their mouths to chant a spell, they would show a row of thin teeth and 4 prominent canine teeth. If the canine teeth were too long, they would give people an impression of fierceness. But their canine teeth were very short, which made them look naughty and cute. Compared to the sirens of the abyss, their expressions were much more solemn. Unfortunately, the wagging tails behind them ruined their goddess-like temperament. No matter what kind of dress they were wearing, whether it was purple, yellow, or red, long or short, without exception, they were all open-cut dresses. Just like how human beings did not want to bind their limbs, it would be uncomfortable to tie their arms to their bodies. Their tails were undoubtedly their 5th limb. Normally, it was just that their fair skin would cause people's imagination to run wild. However, after Ronning's magic crystal cannons were launched, the 2 cat-like monsters bent down in a hurry to change the magic crystals. As a result, some parts that shouldn't be exposed were exposed. Han Jin hurriedly retracted his head. His eyes were going to grow needles. After a few more deafening explosions, the cat demons became even more flustered. Han Jin touched his forehead with his hand. There was a big bump there that was visible to the naked eye. According to the plan he and Lang Ning had discussed last night, he should take action as soon as Leger launched the attack. For Nuremberg, this defensive magic circle was the heart of the city. It was heavily guarded. Han Jin was able to sneak in here not because he was too powerful, but because his Taoist magic had broken the rules of this world and subverted too much common sense. If his ability was no longer a secret, it would not be as easy as it was now. The big bump on his head was caused by the collision. The corundum stones that covered the palace were the masterpieces of alchemists. His earth meld could not penetrate the corundum stones. Caught off guard, he almost fainted. Fortunately, his body had been strengthened a lot. Otherwise, he would have ended up very miserable. The heavy collision immediately alerted the guards. After searching back and forth several times, they found the floating corundum stone in the corner. However, they would never have thought that someone would try to climb up from below. Again, Han Jin had taken advantage of the situation by subverting common sense. Screams came from afar. The remaining towering guards in the palace rushed out of the palace with huge axes. Han Jin waited patiently for a moment. Then he jumped down from the shoulder of the statue and rushed to the nearest monster. At the same time, 4 wooden puppets appeared out of thin air and rushed to the huge crystal pillar. The cat demons were obviously sorcerers. Their reactions were very slow. Han Jin did not care whether he had needle eyes or not. He waved his hand and chopped at a cat demon. The cat demon was bending over to change the magic crystal. Before she could raise her head, Han Jin's hand had already hit her neck. With a crack, the cat demon trembled as if she had been electrocuted. She fell down, and her wagging tail drooped softly. Han Jin did not expect the cat demon's body to be so weak. A strange feeling arose in his heart. However, at this time, there was no time to pity anything. Han Jin shouted and pounced on another cat demon. The cat demon suddenly opened her small mouth, and an invisible sound wave swept past Han Jin. Han Jin suddenly felt his vision blur. The surrounding scenery became distorted, and tall buildings appeared. There were also many things that he was very familiar with, such as phones, computers, cars, and so on. There was even an extremely sloppy old man who was bending over with his hands behind his back, reciting a poem in high spirits. Master, Hanjin was dumbfounded. He forgot everything and stared blankly at the familiar back. When learning a craft, people would usually call the person who taught it their master. There was only one word difference between master and master, but the meaning was as different as heaven and earth. Master was both a master and a father. My parents gave birth to me, and my master shaped me. It was his master who gave him another chance, allowing him to see another sky. It could even be called an immortal road. Hanjin's gratitude towards his master could not be described with words. When he saw that familiar back, Hanjin was already in a daze. The cat demon was also in a daze. She could not believe everything she saw. Was that thing that towered into the clouds a building? What was that flying object that could be compared to a giant dragon? Could that thing that was rushing around be a war chariot? The mental attack was interrupted. Hanjin woke up at the fastest speed possible. He had already realized what had just happened. His pupils suddenly contracted to a point, like the tip of a needle. He hated it. That cat demon had touched the softest part of his heart. It was something that could not be touched. Every time it was touched, he would feel a heart-wrenching pain. He was furious. Some provocation was even more unbearable than toying or bullying. He was afraid. A secret was a secret after all. His origin would be a secret forever. Whoever dared to threaten him in this aspect would be his mortal enemy. Hanjin's figure suddenly cut through the air. Die! In the midst of his angry roar, his fist had already landed on the cat demon's face. The cat demon was still in a daze. After being hit by the fist, her body was like a broken branch. Before her feet could leave the ground, her upper body had already collapsed backward. The back of her head heavily hit the hard rock, and blood splattered everywhere. In fact, even if she did not hit the rock, she would not have survived. Hanjin's fist had already shattered her facial bones. The remaining two cat demons shrieked at the same time, but Hanjin had already cast the charm of spirit refreshment on himself. Besides, he was already mentally prepared. The most important thing in Taoism was to refine one's heart and enter the realm. This level of spiritual attack could no longer affect him. Die! Another angry roar. One of the cat demons did not give up and continued to release mental attacks. Unfortunately, Hanjin's fist had already arrived. Deep throat. It was so deep that it could not be any deeper. Hanjin's fist shattered the cat demon's teeth, tore her cheeks, and almost penetrated the back of her neck. Her neck had already been shattered. The last cat demon was scared out of her wits. She no longer tried to attack Hanjin. Instead, she turned around and ran toward the door of the hall, screaming for help. At first, Hanjin still had a trace of compassion for the fair sex. Now, only the thought of killing was left in his mind. He rushed forward and punched the cat demon's back. The cat demon suddenly turned into a cannonball and flew forward. With a loud bang, the cat demon crashed into the heavy door of the hall. Hanjin's strength was so great that the cat demon stayed on the door for a moment before falling down. The door was already covered in a layer of bright red blood. The four wooden puppets continued to attack the giant crystal pillar. Perhaps the wooden puppet's strength was not enough to destroy the magic array, but they could destroy the connection point between the crystal pillar and the magic array. Gradually, the crystal pillar began to tilt, and the tilt angle was getting bigger and bigger. Angry roars came from outside the hall. A few towering guards had already realized that they had fallen into a trap. Unfortunately, they were still one step too late. When they rushed into the hall, they happened to see the crystal pillar smashing into the floor with great force. Hanjin had already returned to the back of the statue. Seeing that the mission was completed, he suddenly went through the wall. There was no steel stone there. If the magic array was destroyed, there would be a huge explosion. He did not want to stay here. Chapter 128. Perhaps it was because Zaganide was too confident in his fierce reputation, Or perhaps it was because he had always taken the initiative in strategy, but he did not waste too much energy on defense. Therefore, the disappearance of the defensive magic circle meant that Nuremberg had ushered in its doomsday. Lang Ning ordered the 4 magic crystal cannons to fire at the same time. A large part of the east wall of Nuremberg collapsed in an instant. As luck would have it, one of the magic cannonballs landed right in the middle of the group of evil eyes. Dozens of evil eyes were instantly turned into splatters of liquid. The surviving evil eyes rolled into a ball. When they got up, they didn't wait for the commander's orders. They screamed in despair and shot out light randomly. Strictly speaking, the evil eyes were the only long-range strike force that did not have a shooting range limit because they shot out rays of light. Within 200 meters, the rays of light were only as thick as a human pinky finger. Beyond a certain distance, the rays of light would spread rapidly and its power would be negligible. As for the standard range of the rays, it depended on the individual strength of the evil eyes. The 4 magic crystal cannons and the magicians nearby all turned light red, which was the effect of the rays of the evil eyes. However, the rays of light were no longer lethal, so the magicians controlled the magic crystal cannons as if nothing had happened and prepared for the next attack. Lang Ning ordered the cannons to fire again. The giant white balls of light that rose from the ground made the Taurens and evil eyes on the city wall fall into the abyss of despair and completely lose their fighting spirit. They did not understand why the commander on the other side of the wall did not attack when the wall had been blown up. Through the eye of penetration, Ronning saw the surviving soldiers of Nuremberg running down the city wall in panic. He sneered and then gave an order. The sorcerers hurriedly adjusted the muzzles of the magic crystal cannons. In a deafening roar, the magic crystal cannons began to work again. This time, the magic cannonballs landed in the city and blew up the soldiers hiding behind the city walls. A few simple arrow towers also collapsed in an instant. Lang Ning did not know what was waiting for him. Therefore, he cherished every bit of strength and every soldier. In comparison, military resources were insignificant. Moreover, he had already sent 3 cavalry regiments to attack the other roads. He had been powerless before, but from the moment he stepped into the territory of Black Raven City, he would never allow any of his wealth or military resources to flow out. Only generals knew how to attack cities. Perhaps Lang Ning's shoulders were still immature, but he was already thinking about his future development. The soldiers of Riptide Infantry Phalanx scratched their ears and cheeks anxiously. According to common sense, they should have launched an attack long ago, but without orders from above, they didn't dare to move. The 4 magic crystal cannons continued to spit fire. Giant magic cannonballs fell in Nuremberg one after another, splashing deadly shockwaves. No matter what kind of buildings they were all turned into tofu slag, and the creatures in the city were blown into a mess. If anyone flew up into the air, they would be able to clearly see that the landing points of the magic cannonballs were very regular. If the South District was hit by a few cannonballs, the East District would also be hit by a few cannonballs. It would not be less nor more. Soon, a group of Taurens and Evil Eyes, who had completely lost their fighting spirit, fled to the Western District. They opened the gate and swarmed out. Attack! Lang Ning finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this scene through the eyes of penetration. The soldiers, who had been holding back for a long time, roared. The 3 phalanxes moved together, and the rolling iron flow was unstoppable. Lang Ning pulled out his war spear, waved his hand, and led 2 cavalry brigades around the city wall, chasing after the fleeing Taurens and Evil Eyes. Deep in the corridor of the prison, several Taurens with blood-red eyes were drinking. It was very quiet here, and only the occasional clinking of cups could be heard. After a while, when they saw the flag that did not belong to them was placed on the city wall, they looked at each other, picked up their huge axes, and walked straight into the corridor. With a bang, the iron gate was violently kicked open. When the Taurens were about to enter, they were dumbfounded. There was an extra person in the cell, and the stinky prisoner was standing in the middle of the cell, slowly moving his arms. "Watch out!" Han Jin shouted in a low voice. He waved his hand and released a wooden puppet, blocking the door of the cell. He then cast the spirit possession technique on himself and pounced forward. To Han Jin's astonishment, there was no one outside the cell, except for a few giant axes that had been carelessly thrown away. Outside the corridor, several minotaurs were screaming hoarsely while fleeing to the end of the corridor. Although Han Jin couldn't understand what they were shouting, he could hear their desperation. Han Jin suddenly turned around and looked at the prisoner quietly. He had experienced the fighting spirit of the Taurans, and he definitely did not think that he had such a strong deterrent force that he could scare them away without doing anything. The prisoner was still moving his body leisurely and calmly. He was not excited about regaining his freedom, nor was he in pain because of the wounds on his body. Han Jin knew very well what kind of method Zagund had used on the prisoner. After all, he had saved him with his own hands. Yesterday, he only saw 2 iron nails that pierced through the prisoner's palm. In fact, the prisoner's shoulders, legs, and ribs were all pierced through by iron nails. His body was also tightly bound by an unknown metal wire, and some parts of his body were so deep that his bones could be seen. From the perspective of modern medicine, this person should have died a long time ago, but he still looked very relaxed. Not to mention the useless medical knowledge. Just his willpower alone was enough to frighten people. Little guy, thank you for saving me, the prisoner said faintly. Raphael, Han Jin reminded weakly. He was helpless. We're all old people so forgetful. Oh, Mr. Raphael. The prisoner's tone finally had a hint of a smile. What I'm curious about is, you came here because you knew that Zagund would do something to me. Zagund values you so much, so he wouldn't let his guard down. Han Jin smiled. But I'm also curious. Why didn't you remind me yesterday? I'm old, and my reaction can't keep up. After you left yesterday, I kept calling your name for almost the whole night. Han Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then you still can't remember my name? What if you're a very famous person? If I called your name, wouldn't it remind them? That's why I kept calling you little guy. The prisoner slowly crouched down and gently stroked the metal wires that Han Jin had untied. His movements were very gentle, as though he was stroking his lover. I didn't think that Zagund would forget about me. The feeling of being forgotten by an old friend is quite complicated. Hearing that, Han Jin suddenly reacted. What you said makes sense. Zagund should have known that we were going to attack. Why didn't he do anything to you? Or I can take you somewhere else. Who knows? Maybe he forgot. The prisoner carefully put away all the metal wires. Or maybe he and Caroline were having too much fun and Caroline bit off something. So, he couldn't care about anything else. You saw the performance? Performance? Little guy, your heart is quite dirty. Why would you be interested in this kind of thing? Raphael, Han Jin had to repeat himself. You were the one who was dirty first. Okay? Dirty? It's really dirty. The prisoner looked at his skinny arms and then chuckled. Little guy, accompany me to find a place to wash off the dust of the past 10 years. All right, yes, Mr. Raphael, the prisoner interrupted. Han Jin had no choice but to step aside. After you. He had left a few beetles in the corridor, so he clearly knew what was happening outside. He decided that he wouldn't do anything even if there was an accident. He had to see what the prisoner was capable of. The prisoner took a step and slowly walked out. His first few steps were very slow, and his body was swaying like a child who had just learned how to walk. However, when he reached the door, his steps were much steadier. As soon as he walked to the door, a group of sirens of the abyss ran towards him. When they saw the prisoner, they froze and screamed in horror. Then, they turned around and ran away. One of the sirens of the abyss, who was the smallest, fainted. The prisoner continued to walk forward as if he hadn't seen anything. When he passed by the abyssal siren, who had fainted, he suddenly stopped and bent down to pat and touch her. Although his body blocked Han Jin's view, he could clearly see where the prisoner was touching because of a beetle in front of him. Han Jin felt like he was going to collapse. Are you the occupier of this city? The prisoner suddenly asked. I am one of them. Do you have the right? Yes. Then I suggest you keep this siren with you. She is not an adult yet. In human terms, she is a virgin. Sirens of the abyss are very rare. At that time, I calculated that her virginity could be sold for 1,000 gold coins. The prisoner pointed at the sirens of the abyss who were running away. As for them, they're already rotten goods. Han Jin swore that if the prisoner was not an old man who looked unfathomable, he would have kicked him. But at this moment, he couldn't do anything about it. He could only shake his head and say, "If you want her, just tell me. I'm not interested." "Are you really not interested?" The prisoner looked at Han Jin in surprise. "Not interested," Han Jin said confidently. Indeed, he was not interested at all. "You are an excellent young man, brave, smart, and more importantly, powerful. You have mastered strange magic and are sober. At least, you are not addicted to women," the prisoner said softly. Then he paused and asked, "You don't have any problems, do you?" Hearing the prisoner's words, Han Jin suddenly came to his senses. He found that every word the prisoner said was not nonsense. He had a clear purpose. However, when he heard the prisoner's last sentence, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He wanted to lose his temper. Chapter 129. Leger, Sunier, Morrisons, and the others were standing in the center of the square in high spirits, talking loudly about something. This was a true victory, and its significance far exceeded that of killing a few monsters and harvesting a few magic crystals. Apart from Sunier, who was able to maintain her composure, everyone else was beaming with joy, especially Morrisons. He had to speak loudly and laugh loudly. Han Jin and the prisoner walked towards the center of the square. The prisoner had already taken a simple bath and changed into a new set of clothes. He looked much more energetic, but his hair and beard were still a little messy. Han Jin didn't have the time to accompany him to get a haircut, and he couldn't find a barber at this time. "Ah, Raphael, where did you run off to?" Morrison's University shouted. After hearing Morrison's words, Leger also turned around. Then, as if he had seen something unbelievable, his body suddenly trembled. His eyes widened as he stared at the prisoner, and his lips trembled. After a while, he called out tentatively, "Es, sir." "You've grown up," the prisoner said in a very gentle tone. "I almost didn't recognize you." In just an instant, Leger's eyes became wet. He took a few steps forward, as if he wanted to throw himself at the prisoner, but he forced himself to control himself and kneeled on one knee. "Sir, I've finally seen you." Leger's veins were bulging as he clenched the ground tightly. His arms and his entire body were trembling slightly. It wasn't easy for Leger to do this. If he was a few years younger, and if he wasn't so shrewd, he would have definitely cried out loud. The whole square was silent. Even the excited soldiers around them were stunned. Leger was their commander. Who in the world could withstand his kneeling? "Be strong. There are so many people looking at you," the prisoner said slowly. After that, he bent down and used his hands to support Leger's arms, helping Leger up. He stared at Leger for a moment and sighed. "Child, I'm sorry. I already know what happened to your father. I'm really sorry. I'm the one who harmed him." "No, sir, listen to me." The prisoner gently interrupted Leger. "When I left you, I had a very bad feeling. Your father was a pure knight. He was too naive and too kind. If it wasn't for me, your father would have continued to live in that small village. I can't guarantee how good his life would have been, but at least he would have been happy. It's all my fault. I pushed him into this dangerous world." "No, sir." Leger finally couldn't control himself. Sparkling tears rolled down his cheeks. "Before my father passed away, he said, 'Guevara?'" A scream suddenly rang out. The prisoner was stunned. He looked in the direction of the voice. Sunier didn't have any more doubts. She took 2 steps back and took out her bow. The black arrow was already pointed at the prisoner's forehead. "Sunier, no." Leger stepped forward and blocked the prisoner. "Sunier, you're crazy." Morrisons quickly grabbed the bow in Sunier's hand. "Get out of my way," Sunier shouted. Morrisons couldn't help but be stunned. They had known each other for a year, but he had never seen Sunier like this. Her green eyes were filled with a crazy and dangerous light. Even though she was wearing a mask, he could see the muscles on Sunir's face twitching. He even had a feeling that if he took another step forward, Sunir wouldn't hesitate to attack him. Hanjin suddenly went behind Sunir. He opened his arms and hugged Sunir. He whispered, "Sunir, what are you doing? Let's talk." Sunir suddenly turned into a female leopard. She used all of her strength to struggle. She used her hands to grab, her legs to kick, and her teeth to bite. In just a few moves, the clothes on Hanjin's arms were torn to shreds, leaving bloody marks on them. Hanjin didn't dare to let go. Seeing Sunir like this, he knew that she would definitely attack. With Leger standing in front of them, he didn't want to see a tragedy happen. Morrison's let out a sigh of relief. He pulled out his sword and blocked Leger's attack. He even waved his hand to signal Leger and the others to leave quickly. Sunir still had some rationality left. Otherwise, she would have used the bowstring to cut Hanjin's hands. However, this remaining rationality made her feel even more pain. After struggling for a while, Sunir leaned into Hanjin's arms and said in a weak voice, "Do you know who he is?" Hanjin didn't say anything. He just listened quietly. The others around them were also waiting for an answer. "He is the brother of Lord Kassa, the Dragon Knight, Guevara. Do you know how many elves have died in his hands? He is a butcher whose hands are stained with blood." Sunir sighed. "Raphael, let go of me. Otherwise, I will hate you forever." Although Sunir's voice was very low, the surroundings were extremely quiet. Because everyone wanted to know the answer, Sunir's voice was clearly heard by everyone. Now that the answer was out, the atmosphere was even quieter than before. What did it mean to be a Dragon Knight? In order to become a Dragon Knight, one must first have the strength to subdue a giant dragon. This was something that couldn't be faked. In comparison, the ferocious Bloody Knight Gerald was nothing. Even the two overlords of the Tereshah Mountains, Zagund and Dismark, were only 11th grade powerhouses. Hanjin was stunned. Sunir took the opportunity to twist her body and struggle out of Hanjin's arms. However, Hanjin's spirit possession technique was not undeserved. He reacted quickly and reached out to grab Sunir's shoulder. He pulled and hugged Sunir back into his arms. The only difference was that he hugged Sunir from behind. Now, the two of them were facing each other. "Can you calm down?" Hanjin shouted. He was extremely nervous now, not because he was afraid that Sunir would attack Sunir, but because he was worried that Sunir would be hurt. After interacting with Sunir, he knew that the prisoner's personality was very unique and unpredictable. They had talked a lot, but he still couldn't make a judgment. This kind of person was the most terrifying. "You?" Sunir was anxious and angry. She almost fainted. "Can you listen to me for a while?" The prisoner patted Morrison's shoulder and signaled him to move aside. Morrison's hesitated. Like Hanjin, he was worried that Sunir would be hurt. However, if a Dragon Knight wanted to hurt someone, a 7th grade fighter wouldn't be able to do anything. Therefore, he obediently moved aside. "You're an elf from Wild Willow City, right?" The prisoner sighed. "I admit that I've hurt some elves, but that's war, damn war. If you think that as long as you're hurt, you have a reason to take revenge, then I have a better reason than you. When the Silver Pegasus Legion attacked my castle, they killed all my family members and didn't even leave me a servant. Shouldn't I do something about it?" Sunir was stunned. She suddenly stopped struggling. Just as she was about to say something, the prisoner continued. "You're saying that it's because I hurt elves in the past, so you want to take revenge on me. But what about before that? Do you know why my brother hates elves so much? It's because when we were young, our father received some merchants and was attacked by elves. They said that my father was a slave trader. You have a reason to kill me, and I have a reason to kill you, right? Ha! A butcher whose hands are stained with blood?" The prisoner paused. "Before you use the word butcher to describe others, think about what you elves have done. You've attacked our cities everywhere. Yes, you've only killed those who resisted, but you've burned our houses and food. You've destroyed our farmlands. Wherever you go, there's only ruins left. How many of us have survived by eating grass, tree bark, and even human flesh? After my brother was defeated, the population of each city was less than a third of what it used to be. Can you answer me? Who killed him? That's war. Sunir replied with difficulty. Yes, that's war. Like I said, it's a damn war. The prisoner laughed. You hate me, you want to kill me. I can give you a chance, but don't put yourself on the side of justice. Don't think of yourself as a judge. If your hands are stained with the blood of others, then you won't have the right to judge others anymore. I hate the darkness, but I hate the light even more. That's because the light is always promoted by those who think they're righteous. It can't withstand the test at all. It will burst like a bubble with a light touch. The prisoner's eyes were filled with a mocking smile. Also, I suggest that you don't make things difficult for your friends. To young people like them, friendship is the most precious thing. I was young once too. I can understand them. He wasn't lying. The Dragon Knight Guevara was a person who walked on the border between light and darkness. He didn't say anything when Hanjin saved him, but that didn't mean that he didn't care about Hanjin. Plus, Leger was there, so he reluctantly said a few words. Otherwise, he wouldn't explain his so-called crimes, not even half a word. Moreover, the other party was just an insignificant elf. Sunir only felt her body go weak. She wanted to take revenge for the elves who died tragically. She did put herself on the moral high ground and hoped that Hanjin and the others would understand. However, the prisoner's words were ruthless. He didn't hesitate to strip away Sunir's moral halo. Of course, he also stripped away his own. This made Sunir feel very lost. At least, before Sunir could find a suitable reason for her elves' deaths, she couldn't summon up the courage to take revenge. Leger, walk around with me. It's been a long time since someone talked to me. The prisoner didn't look at Sunir anymore. He turned around and walked towards the back of the square. Yes, sir. Leger glanced at Sunir and hurriedly followed the prisoner. Chapter 130. Sunir, I didn't expect you to be so impulsive. Hanjin tried his best to keep his tone calm. Morrison's added, not impulsive, but brave. If it were you, would you dare to challenge a dragon knight? You. Sunir took a deep breath and suddenly said, I was too impulsive just now. It was my fault. I apologize. Hanjin, Morrisons, and Sasu looked at each other. Hanjin carefully said, And then? What then? And then would you still go and find trouble with him? Do you really think I'm a fool? Sunir smiled bitterly. Guevara is a dragon knight, a tier 12 powerhouse. Why would I find trouble with him? Then can I ask, what were you doing just now? Morrison scratched his head and asked curiously. Just now? I already apologized for what happened just now. What else do you want? Sunir said angrily. It's okay. Morrisons hurriedly pulled Sasu aside. We'll leave first. After saying that, he gave Hanjin a look, hinting Hanjin to persuade Sunir again. However, it was a little funny that Morrisons, who had always been careless, was in charge of the situation. The room became quiet. Sunir was at a loss of what to do. What had happened today was so strange. She didn't realize it when it happened, but when she recalled it after, she blushed and her heart beat faster. Moreover, Hanjin was afraid that something would happen to Sunir, so he hugged Sunir with all his strength. With the effect of spirit possession, even a couple in love would not hug so tightly. Even with Sunir's strong body, she still felt breathless, let alone other feelings. Hanjin didn't know what to say. Sunir saw that Hanjin didn't say anything and became even more nervous. She took a step forward and was about to leave. Hanjin hurriedly stretched out his arms to block Sunir. What are you doing? Sunir couldn't help but take 2 steps back and whispered. Her cheeks were already red, but fortunately, she was wearing a mask. It's not what I'm doing, it's what you're doing, Hanjin said seriously. Just now, Sunir's attitude was too crazy, so he couldn't help but be careful. However, Hanjin didn't realize how similar his action was to the hug just now, and how nervous Sunir was now. I'm not going anywhere, Sunir whispered. Move away. No. Are you going to move away or not? No. The two of them confronted each other. Sunir was also confused at this time. There was a window behind her. With her strength, if she turned around and jumped out of the window, Hanjin might not be able to stop her, but she was determined to go through the door. First, it was because the appearance of the Dragon Knight Guevara was too shocking. Second, it was because when a girl or woman's heart was beating fast because of something, her intelligence would become very questionable. Seeing that Hanjin was not moving away, Sunir finally became ruthless. She coldly snorted and said, "You dare to be rude to me?" After saying that, she simply closed her eyes and directly slammed into the door. Hanjin was still thinking whether this sentence was a question or a denial, but Sunir had already closed her eyes and slammed into Sunir. He didn't have time to think about it. He wrapped his arms around her and hugged her tightly. Sunir's body stiffened. She opened her eyes and stared blankly at Hanjin. She never thought that Hanjin would dare to tease her so openly. Logically speaking, she should have kicked Hanjin away, then pulled out her longbow and shot a few dozen holes in Hanjin's body. However, she felt that her body was weak, and she couldn't muster up any strength. Sunir's body was very slender, and when hugged in his arms, it felt as if she was boneless. The fragrance that she exhaled was just right on Hanjin's face. Hanjin couldn't help but think of an idiom from his previous world. The wisdom of the ancient people was really too wonderful. However, he immediately realized that he was wrong. What was he thinking? Just now, when he hugged Sunir in front of everyone, he did it openly and confidently. However, this was a dark room, and there were only the two of them. The atmosphere had changed. Hanjin hurriedly let go of his hands. Sunir took a step back and quietly looked at Hanjin. Hanjin was stunned for a moment and said unnaturally, "Let's sit here for a while. What are we going to do outside? It's so messy outside." "That's fine too," Sunir said in a low voice. A square table separated the two of them. Keeping a certain distance from each other gave Sunir a sense of security. She calmly tidied up the soft armor on her body, pulling here and there and flicking it from time to time with her fingers as if she was flicking away a wisp of dust. Doing this a few times wasn't a problem, but repeating it over and over again seemed a little strange, especially the two pieces of soft armor that protected her upper arms. Sunir adjusted dozens of angles, which was completely unnecessary. In comparison, Hanjin maintained the true demeanor of a master. After all, he had studied professional knowledge and understood the importance of details. He also understood that small body movements would often betray him. Therefore, when he was nervous, he would always remain motionless, and even the frequency of his breathing was the same. After a long time, Sunir finally couldn't hold it in anymore. "How long are we going to sit here for?" Her words were somewhat reproachful. "You said to sit for a while, and you really want to sit forever?" Cough. Hanjin dryly coughed. "Sunir, can you tell me about your past? You see, you know my secret, so you should let me share yours. What do you want to know? As long as you're willing to tell me, I'll like it." Hanjin tried his best to keep himself natural, but he forgot that in this kind of environment, the more natural he was, the weirder it would seem. For example, talk about that war. Sunir was silent for a moment and slowly said, "That was the first time I walked onto the battlefield." The warm twilight shone in through the window and poured down on Sunir's body. Her elegant blonde hair became softer and softer. In the beginning, she seemed a little restrained because she had never confided in anyone before. She needed Hanjin to constantly ask her questions before she could continue. However, as time passed, she became more and more fluent, and the changes in her expression became more and more sincere. She didn't hide anything at all. She had comrades, but she never had real friends. Her elders and brothers hoped that she could mature and become an excellent commander. Once she showed any signs of weakness, she would be severely criticized. In order not to disappoint them, and also for her own dignity, she couldn't say anything. Her peers were often her subordinates. Because of her status, she was looked up to by countless elves. Every time she succeeded, the other elves would be proud of her. She was the hope of the elves in Wild Willow City, so she couldn't show her loss and pain. In her life, Sunir had never experienced the joy of confiding. When she shared her pain with others, the pain would be reduced by half. When she shared her happiness with others, the happiness would be doubled. No matter whether Han Jin was qualified or not in the past, he was definitely the best listener now. The quality that he had developed as a private investigator was fully displayed by him. Every time Sunir finished talking, he would use a sentence or a few words to once again evoke the melody of Sunir's heart. This was true relaxation. When Sunir sat on the chair, she never thought that she would talk so much today. She talked about the first time she participated in a battle, the first time she killed someone, her sorrow, hesitation, helplessness, and even her despair and numbness. Of course, she also talked about her happiness and dreams. There were also some things that shouldn't be said, but Sunir also talked about it. When she brought the hundreds of elves back to Wild Willow City and the scene of the entire city crying, Sunir couldn't help but shed tears. She didn't hide anything. The Silver Pegasus Corps had suffered heavy losses and brought heavy losses to Wild Willow City. This marks betrayal, and taking the victory for himself had made Wild Willow City's situation even worse. The elders even suggested that they give up Wild Willow City and go south to another elven city. For the older elves, Wild Willow City was just a city, but for Sunir it was her home because she was born in Wild Willow City. After the outbreak of this war, although she hated Dismark, Sunir was very clear that if the Holy Crown City was occupied, Wild Willow City would be the next. Therefore, Sunir insisted on supporting the Holy Crown City. However, her clansmen had already hated the war to the extreme, so almost no one agreed with Sunir's opinion. The elves also had their own families. The Silver Pegasus Army was the most elite army in Wild Willow City, and its members were all the future stars of the elven families. Almost all of them had been wiped out, which meant that thousands of families had lost their future stars. What was even more helpless was that such a heavy sacrifice had not been exchanged for anything. The sacrifice itself was already very sad, but the sacrifice for nothing was even more heart-wrenching. Sunir had already taken off her mask. She had been suppressing her emotions, but once she let go, she could no longer control them. During this time, she had cried and laughed. A moment ago, when her beautiful smile bloomed on her face, there were still tears on her eyelashes. The next moment, when new tears filled her eyes, her smile had yet to fade away. Later, Han Jin also lost his composure and often expressed his own opinions. He didn't deliberately cater to Sunir. This kind of spiritual conversation didn't necessarily need alcohol to liven things up. The key was that they had met the right person, let alone Sunir. Even Han Jin didn't remember when she lit the candles. It wasn't until late at night that the two of them realized that it was too late. Sigh, I didn't think we would talk for so long. Sunir looked outside and smiled. Now you share my secret. Are you satisfied? She didn't feel awkward anymore. On the contrary, she felt as if her heart had been scalded by something. Actually, you're not as smart as I thought you were. Han Jin sighed. You're just too competitive. No matter what difficulties you have, you don't want to tell anyone. You even wear that stupid thing all the time. We don't know what you're thinking. Sunir was just about to retaliate when Morrison's loud voice came from afar. Big brother, big sister, why aren't you coming out? I've already lost so badly. You're not really going to spend the night here, are you? Morrison's, you despicable and shameless bastard. You're shameless. Sassu, who had always been polite, was actually louder than Morrison's. It seemed like he was about to go crazy. Although it was late, I still managed to rush out. Heave a sigh of relief. Time to sleep. I can't take it anymore. Chapter 131. Han Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he pushed the door open. At the same time, the candles in the room were extinguished. Even though Sunir had been through countless fierce battles, she was still a girl. She wouldn't appear in front of others under such circumstances. However, Morrison's didn't know what Sunir was thinking. He was obviously relieved when he saw that Han Jin was the only one who appeared. If it was Han Jin, the two of them would at most have a fight. Morrison's wasn't afraid of fighting, but Sunir was different. A high-grade hunter's arrow was a terrifying existence that couldn't be ignored. Morrison's, you're getting bolder and bolder. Are you betting me against Sunir? Han Jin glared at Morrison's. The atmosphere between him and Sunir was very harmonious, but it was ruined by Morrison's shout. How could he not be angry? Morrison smiled when he saw Han Jin's cold expression. It's just a joke. You won't take it to heart, will you? Why would I? Han Jin laughed. Although he didn't seem to care, he said meaningfully, Of course I won't take it to heart. But women can hold grudges sometimes. Morrison's expression turned bitter, but he still said with a hint of hope, Sunir isn't an ordinary woman. She's a great and holy elf. She won't care about such a small thing, right? Don't you think it's a little too late to say nice things now? Han Jin felt a little helpless. Morrison's compliments were not good enough. It gave people goosebumps. I'm telling the truth, Morrison said calmly. Raphael, don't you think so? Forget it. I'm not going to talk about this with you. Han Jin said casually. Morrison's was dreaming if he thought he could catch Han Jin's wrong words. What did you say just now? Big sister? What about tonight? Morrison's expression changed. He knew that he had violated the taboo when he shouted the last sentence. He wanted to let it go, but Han Jin mentioned it again. He was too evil. Morrison's, don't stay with me for the next few days. I don't want to get hurt, Han Jin said softly. But Morrison's was about to say something when he heard the sound of a bowstring being pulled from Sunir's room. In the silence of the night, the sound was unusually cold. Morrison's heart sank. Sunir sat in the dark with a mischievous smile on her face. The bowstring in her hand was still trembling slightly. She suddenly realized something strange. Since when did she learn to play pranks with Han Jin? In the past, this would have been unimaginable. However, it felt pretty good. Sunir smiled. Han Jin was relieved when he heard the noise from the room. He smiled. Since Sunir was willing to play along with him, it meant that she had calmed down a lot. Sasso, what did the two of you bet on? Han Jin asked when he saw Sasso tiptoeing out of the courtyard. Sasso had no choice but to stop when he heard Han Jin's words. He turned around and laughed dryly. It's nothing. Just a small matter. Small matter? Before Han Jin could say anything, Morrison's glared at him. Since it's a small matter, how about we call off the bet? How can that be? Sasso panicked when he heard this. He looked at Han Jin and softened his tone. You're a man. How can you go back on your word? I'm not going back on my word. Morrison's smile was extremely sinister in Sassu's eyes. Everyone is here. Sassu, you can announce our bet loudly. That way, I won't be able to go back on my word even if I want to. Morrison's casually glanced at Sunir's room and deliberately raised his voice. I'm not the one who suggested it. What's there to be afraid of? You. Sassu was a little dizzy. He didn't expect Morrison's to know this trick. Who said that this guy was brainless? Morrison's became more confident when he saw Sassu's conflicted expression. Sometimes people were like this. No matter how miserable they would feel much better if they saw others in a worse state. Sassu looked at Morrison's, who was standing there proudly. He knew that Morrison's wouldn't dare to say it out loud. Sassu was furious. He couldn't help but make up his mind. If you don't want to be nice, then don't blame me for being unjust. At most, we'll all die together. Sassu cleared his throat and put on a brave face. He said, At the beginning, I said that you wouldn't come out until 2 hours had passed. Morrison's didn't believe me, so we made a bet. Han Jin was a little relieved when he heard this. If that was all, then it wasn't a big deal. However, when he saw Sassu's expression, he knew that it wasn't over yet. He asked, and then, 2 hours passed, and you didn't come out. Of course, Morrison's lost. However, he wasn't willing to give up. He said that you would definitely come out in an hour. Morrison's felt that something was wrong. He quickly interrupted. Okay, Sassu, I admit defeat. Let's go back. Let's not disturb Sunir's rest. Sassu looked at Morrison's with disdain. Now you know how to admit defeat? If I'm unlucky, then you won't be lucky either. So, I gave him another chance. I bet that you wouldn't come out after another hour. Just like that, another hour passed, and you still didn't come out. This guy had lost his head. So, he suggested that we continue the bet. Sassu, Please don't say any more. I'll double the bet, okay? Morrison's expression was begging. He even looked like he wanted to rush up and stuff Sesua's mouth. Reg's figure suddenly appeared beside Moxink and grabbed his arm. Moxink, can't you act like a man? Didn't you ask Cessation to say that? Why are you stopping him now? Moxink's face was filled with disdain, as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. Morrison's almost fainted. Why didn't he realize that Leger was such a gossipy guy? Judging from his words, he knew that this guy had been lying in ambush for a long time. Seeing Sasu open his mouth again, Morrison's couldn't stop him. He couldn't help but close his eyes in pain. He knew that he was going to die this time. Sasu obviously wanted to die together. Even if Sunir walked out of the house, she wouldn't be able to stop him. Morrison said that you guys wouldn't spend the night in the house because Sunir is an elf. Ahem, she wouldn't just find a random place to sleep. You guys would at most be intimate for a while, and then, whoosh, an arrow flew out of the window and interrupted Sesua's words. As it turned out, a magician's reaction was quite fast. Sasu didn't even think before he cast a magic barrier around himself and dashed towards the door. After the first arrow flew out of the house, there was an obvious pause, as if he was considering who to shoot next. By this time, Cessation had already reached the gate of the courtyard, while Moxink was still standing there, waiting for his death. Soon, the person in the house made her choice. The second arrow flew straight towards Morrison's face. Morrison's opened his eyes as he instinctively shrunk his neck. The arrow flew past his scalp. Morrison's couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. It seemed that Sunir was really angry. It was then that Morrison's realized that Leger, who was grabbing his arm, was gone. He took a closer look and saw that Leger was standing in a corner where he couldn't attack. What made Morrison's even angrier was that Han Jin was standing there as well. The two of them looked like they were watching a show. Just as Morrison's was thinking about what to do, the person in the house seemed to have made up her mind. Arrows flew out of the house one after another. They were all aimed at Morrison's from tricky angles. Morrison screamed. His combat aura ignited as he ran towards the wall closest to him. It was impossible for him to escape through the door. Morrison's didn't want to become a cripple or a hedgehog. Perhaps it was because Sunir didn't use her full strength. The arrows lost their power after entering Morrison's combat aura. However, Morrison's didn't dare to let his guard down. He ran towards the wall as fast as he could and jumped up high. Morrison's hand was already on top of the wall. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. As long as he could climb over the wall, he would be safe. No matter how strong Sunir was, her arrows wouldn't change directions. However, in the next moment, what happened next stunned everyone. A burly wooden giant abruptly appeared on the top of the wall. Although it didn't launch any attack, the wooden giant's timing was perfect. For Moxink, the short wall immediately became an insurmountable mountain. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Morrison stared blankly at the wooden figure in front of him with mixed feelings. Damn you, Raphael. How could you do this to me? Morrison's was so shocked that he didn't notice how he looked like a giant target on top of the wall. Sunir's house was still dark. It was impossible to see her from the outside. The only thing that could be heard was the sound of bowstrings. One arrow after another flew towards Morrison's at lightning speed. Although she was angry, Sunir knew her limits. The arrow only pierced Morrison's clothes and pierced deep into the wall. She didn't aim for Morrison's body. Although Morrison's wasn't injured, the feeling of the cold arrow piercing through his body still made his heart palpitate. Morrison screamed and jumped up like a rabbit that had been shot by an arrow. After a few ripping sounds, his clothes and pants were torn apart, revealing his muscles. However, Morrison's didn't care if he made a fool of himself or not. He quickly dodged the wooden figure and flipped over the wall. Sasu trembled when he heard Morrison's screams from afar. He quickened his pace and felt lucky. Leger's mouth was wide open. He looked at the wooden figure on top of the wall, and then at the pieces of cloth floating down from the sky. He wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Han Jin smiled and said in a low voice, "Anger isn't good for the body. She needs to find a place to vent her anger. Don't you think so?" Author's note: I promised little sister Xiao Xiao in the group that I would update before 12 today, but in the end, I didn't manage to do it. I'm ashamed. Although it was only a few minutes off, it was still over the time limit. I admit that I'm guilty. Chapter 132. How is it? Do you feel anything? Han Jin asked in a soft voice. Your magic is too strange. Guevara smiled and looked at his right hand. No matter how one looked at it, he was disabled. There was a hole in his palm, through which one could see what was on the other side. It was not only his muscles that were missing, but also his bones. What was even more shocking was that there were layers of black-red muscles growing around the wound. They were twisted into a ball and looked exceptionally ferocious. Among the thousands of Taoist sects, there were indeed spells that could revive the dead and regrow bones. However, with his current strength, he couldn't use them. Even if he could, he would carefully consider the gains and losses. Of course, it was a good thing to help others, but if he had to pay a huge price for it, then he had to ask if it was worth it. Give me your left hand, Han Jin said. Guevara gave his left hand to Han Jin and looked around. Why are you all surrounding this old man? Sir, can you hold the spear again? Leger asked sadly. In fact, when Guevara was teaching his father, the father and son did not know about Guevara's background. They only heard about it a few days ago. It was sad to think that an invincible dragon knight had become like this. What? You don't want an old man like me to fight for you, do you? Guevara laughed. No, Leger was a little anxious. His personality was not like this, but in front of Guevara, he always unknowingly turned into a child. Where's your dragon? Morrison suddenly asked heartlessly. The atmosphere suddenly froze, and the air seemed to have solidified. An indescribable feeling seeped into their skin. It was not ice, but it was colder than ice. They could not see anything, but their hearts felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on them, making it hard for them to breathe. Soon, Guevara smiled, and the atmosphere suddenly relaxed. He looked at Morrison's and asked, Big guy, why did you ask this question? Morrison's was a little scared, but since Guevara had asked him, he could not avoid the question. He could only ask carefully, Why is your dragon not with you? Did it die in battle? No. Guevara narrowed his eyes. Right now, it should be living very well and very free. On the day I lost the battle, it had already left me. Now that I think about it, it has been almost 20 years since then. How can this be? Morrison's cried out in surprise. Why not? Dragon Knight and dragon. Shouldn't they never be separated? Where did you hear that from? Guevara laughed. That's what people say. Cessation also felt a strong curiosity and stepped forward to interrupt. You children, Guevara could not help but sigh. Tell me, in your mind, what do dragons look like? They are huge, majestic, and noble. Their long lifespan has given them infinite wisdom and unimaginable power. It can even be said that dragons are the symbol of power. They can't tolerate evil. Cessation opened his mouth and said, Wait, what I want are your true thoughts, not poems, Guevara interrupted. In our mind, dragons are like that. Morrison said, Okay, then let me ask you, in your mind, what does he look like? Guevara pointed at Sassu. He is a despicable man, a traitor. Morrison said angrily. He still could not forget what happened last night. I see. Guevara was also a little embarrassed. He then pointed at Han Jin and asked, What about him? He, values women over friends. He is also not a good person. What about him? Guevara pointed at Leger again. He is always sneaking around. What good can he do? Guevara could not help but be stunned. He had to admit that because he had just interacted with these young people and was not familiar with them, he had made a big mistake. Guevara did not want to waste his breath on Morrison's. He turned to Leger and said, Leger, then tell me, what kind of person is Raphael? He is very smart and has his own opinions. On the surface, his fighting skills are not outstanding. But in reality, he is the most difficult person to deal with among us, Leger said slowly. Leger said slowly, and he's very responsible. When he's in danger, He always thinks of everyone first and then himself. He's a qualified leader. Hey, I did not say that I will follow his orders. Morrison's shouted again. Big guy, be honest. Guevara frowned. Morrison's muttered in a very low voice and finally stopped talking. Big guy said that he values women over friends. But you said that he is very responsible. You're all friends and are very familiar with each other. You will have different opinions about a person. Also, Guevara smiled and said, have you really seen a giant dragon? As far as I know, the giant dragons are now divided into 4 regions. There are also 2 dragon cities. There are so many giant dragons. Why do you think that they all have the same personality? Noble, intolerant of evil. Haha, your elf companion did not have any good feelings toward giant dragons. Is she evil? Hanjin, Sassu, and the others looked at each other. They just remember how Sunir had described the red dragons. Have you been to a city? Any city will do, Guevara said. Of course. Isn't Nuremberg just a city? What makes a city? Of course. Of course, it is the lives of various races. Haha, from the perspective of humans, men and women form a family. Then countless families form a city. Do you think that the relationship between husband and wife is the same? Guevara smiled and said, some couples can respect and love each other and fight for their families. However, some couples become like enemies. They quarrel and attack each other. Even the men and women have affairs. Am I right? Why are you saying this? Morrison's asked, puzzled. The relationship between a dragon knight and a dragon is the same. Guevara sighed softly and said, what you are familiar with is only the gilded role models. The 4 of you have different personalities and are good at different fields. Look at the soldiers around you. They are even more different. Even the leaves that fall from the trees will not be the same. Why do you think that the giant dragons are the same? Since the birth of civilization, how many dragon knights have there been? Their personalities, their dragons, their experiences, and their experiences are really the same? Wrong. They are loyal, but they are also betrayed. They work together, but there are also differences. Do you know what is the biggest weakness of you young people? You always like to put similar things into the same mold. Guevara smiled and said, at least, I am an example of someone who was hurt. How is that possible? Sassua's eyes widened. Is it not possible? Think carefully. Are there really no giant dragons that have betrayed the Dragon Knight? I remember now. Frost Dragon Wave. As long as you remember. I'm not interested in stories. Guevara smiled. Sassu hurriedly said, but the Frost Dragon Pulronica was cursed by the Dark Lord. In the end, she betrayed the Dragon Knight Saxon. Guevara paused and sighed helplessly. You have read a lot of books, but your brain is damaged. Sassu blushed, but he was still unconvinced. Isn't that the case? Pulronica has always kept her promise. In the end, because she was not clear-headed, promises are nothing. Guevara showed a look of disdain. Oaths are obeyed because of morality or benefits. The oath itself has no power. If oaths can solve problems, why are there so many people bleeding on the continent? Why are there still wars? Sassu was stunned. He was speechless for a long time. What you see with your own eyes can also be a lie. What you have heard, can you believe it? Guevara asked softly. Sassu smiled bitterly. As the saying goes, 3 people make a tiger. If a story was repeated too many times, not only would it make others believe it, but it would also make one believe it. Therefore, in the depths of Sassua's heart, a tower of faith had been erected. However, Guevara did not care about his feelings and wishes and forcefully poured dirty water on his tower of faith. He wanted to refute, but he did not know how to do so. This was because when it came to understanding the world, he knew that he was far inferior to Guevara. Are you willing to be ridden? Guevara said, for example, being ridden by him. Guevara pointed at Morrison's. Sassu hurriedly shook his head. Giant dragons are not willing either. Guevara smiled. A human can be proud of being a dragon knight, but a giant dragon will never be proud of being a mount. You mean the holy oath between a dragon knight and a giant dragon is not like the legends? Sassu asked. Legends? Guevara smiled. In the legends of the humans, They're the masters of the continent. In the legends of the elves are the pillars of the world. The giant dragons also have their own legends. There are also other races that desperately boast about their glory and greatness. They use all kinds of deeds to prove that they have saved the continent. Unfortunately, we only have one continent. If all the legends are true, then our continent is really full of disasters. Then what should I believe? Sasu was a little confused. You have to think about this question yourself. Guevara's gaze fell on Hanjin. Mr. Raphael, your little elf is here to find you. Before he finished speaking, Sunir's figure appeared from the corner of the corridor. Morrison's immediately jumped up and rushed to the back. Chapter 133. General, a soldier came in and timidly handed something to Lang Ning. Lang Ning took it and glanced at it. His face suddenly turned red, and he slammed his fist on the table. Fortunately, he didn't release his combat power, or the table would have been smashed on the spot. What's wrong? Leger raised his head in astonishment. Those damned cavemen. They always find ways to make trouble for us. Lang Ning took a deep breath and handed the paper to Leger. Young Marshal, please take a look. Leger took the paper and flipped through a few pages. He said in astonishment, "We occupied Nuremberg with 0 casualties, and then more than 200 soldiers died in the past few days?" "Yes, cavemen did this," Sunir asked in surprise. "Take a look." Leger handed the paper to Sunir again. Sunir read it carefully. Compared with other cities, Nuremberg was a purely multiracial gathering place. The largest population was not humans, but cavemen who had no visual organs. Cavemen had the lowest status among the abyssal races. The other races, such as minotaurs and evil eyes, were not productive. They only lived by killing. For thousands of years, the heavy burden of labor had always been on the shoulders of the cavemen. Every time there was a war, the cavemen had to play the role of cannon fodder. However, this race's personality was a little strange. They showed a deep sense of servility to the abyssal races, but they were extremely cruel to the intelligent creatures on the ground. There were about 70,000 cavemen in the city, nearly half of the population. The intensity of their resistance was far greater than that of the abyssal sirens, minotaurs, evil eyes, and other superior abyssal races. Even female cavemen and children picked up weapons and kept attacking riptide soldiers. It could be described as pouncing forward and pouncing on the back. It was like a lowly prostitute suddenly using extreme violence to attack her customers. The huge contrast was stupefying. Instead of reflecting on what they had done wrong, it was better to think that they had gone mad. Moreover, Nuremberg was not an ordinary city. Cavemen were born to be good at digging tunnels, and they were used to living underground. The underground of Nuremberg had almost been hollowed out by them. It was undoubtedly very disadvantageous for human soldiers to pursue them in the dense tunnels like a spider web. "Is there someone behind this?" Sunir asked. "No." Lang Ning shook his head and said, "I've been paying attention to this since the first day. If there really is someone plotting in the dark, then it must be the minotaurs, evil eyes, and abyssal sirens. But go to the captive camp and take a look. Those guys are all very obedient. The number of missing people has already reached 400. Yes, if they go missing here, their chances of survival are pitifully small." Lang Ning smiled bitterly. "To be precise, we've lost more than 600 soldiers." Is this a difficult thing to do? Hanjin was a little puzzled. If there's one caveman causing trouble, you kill 10 of them. If there are 10 cavemen causing trouble, you kill 100 of them. I don't believe that they have the courage to continue fighting against us. Everyone's eyes were focused on Hanjin. Only Guevara smiled. Hanjin asked curiously, "What's wrong?" "We can't do this," Sasu said. "Then what's the difference between us and Zagund?" Hanjin almost laughed out loud, but when he saw the serious look on everyone's face, he realized that something was wrong. "It's just killing some cavemen. You don't have to make it sound so serious, right? If they resist, we can kill them, but we can't hurt the innocent," Sunir said softly. This was also the principle of the elves. Of course, just like Guevara's condemnation, it was just a principle to comfort himself. Although the Silver Pegasus army did not kill civilians, they had directly or indirectly killed countless people. Hanjin paused for a moment, then smiled. Then what do you think we should do? It was not that he was cruel, but it was because he did not see the cavemen as humans at all. Moreover, there was a saying, those who are not of my race will have different intentions. Even different races would have a huge difference. What about different races? We should talk to the Minotaurs and Evil Eyes and let them persuade the cavemen. Sasu said, the cavemen are the most servile race. They won't dare to disobey the orders of the superior races of the abyss. Do you know how to solve the problem? Hanjin sighed. The most important thing to solve a problem is to simplify a complicated matter, not to complicate a simple problem. I agree with Raphael. Lang Ning said, we don't have much time. We have to leave Nuremberg in 3 days at the latest and advance to Black Raven City. Let the Minotaurs and Evil Eyes persuade them. Is 3 days enough? We will personally hunt down the cavemen who are causing trouble. Leger said, they are only using the tunnels to fight against us. Raphael, and I should be able to deal with them. What about tens of thousands of cavemen? Just us? Hanjin laughed. Then what do you think we should do? Leger kicked the ball back to the table. The hatred between us and the abyss races has existed for too long. This hatred cannot be resolved by persuasion. If we want to resolve it completely, there's only one way, and that is to destroy them, Guevara said slowly. This is Zagun's way, not ours. Sunir said coldly. Although she had already apologized to Guevara for her rudeness, she still insisted on keeping a certain distance from him. Guevara smiled and slowly walked to the door. Lang Ning, take me to the barracks. Yes, sir. Lang Ning was stunned and hurriedly walked over. Sometimes there was no way to keep a secret. After Guevara's identity was exposed by Sunir, the entire army knew that there was a Dragon Knight in a very short time. This was very good for the army's morale, but it also created some unexpected problems. You guys sit down first. I will follow you. Hanjin stood up. Guevara had given him a hint just now. Obviously, he had something to say to him. After leaving the door, they walked straight east along the street. Riptide's barracks and the captive camp were here. Guevara did not say anything and just walked slowly along the street. Hanjin and Lang Ning followed behind him in confusion. Coincidentally, when they were about 200 meters away from the barracks, they met a group of soldiers who were escorting the captives. In the middle of the group, there were more than a dozen subterranean dwellers who had just been captured. The tough ropes could deprive them of their freedom, but could not deprive them of their ferocity. Almost none of the subterranean dwellers were willing to accept their fate. They all struggled with all their might and made a series of incomprehensible sounds. The soldiers had no choice but to knock them to the ground and forcefully drag them away. Wait, Guevara said. The group of soldiers hurriedly stopped. The captain respectfully saluted and said softly, General, sir, is there anything I can help you with? He did not know how to address a Dragon Knight, so he could only use sir instead. It must have taken a lot of effort to capture them, right? Guevara laughed. The captain could not help but touch the visible scars on his face. He smiled bitterly and said, Sir, our luck is not bad. Yesterday, almost all the members of the 7th Squad were injured. Now, a few of them are still bedridden. Raphael, actually, your method will not work, Guevara suddenly said. My method? Release that subterranean dweller. Guevara pointed with his finger. The captain was stunned and looked at Lang Ning with a questioning gaze. When he saw Lang Ning nodding, he hurriedly walked to the subterranean dweller and untied the ropes himself. As soon as the subterranean dweller regained his freedom, he bared his fangs and brandished his claws at the captain. However, the captain was already prepared. He raised his leg and kicked the subterranean dweller to the ground. The subterranean dweller struggled to get up, only to be kicked down again and then get up again. After repeating this several times, he finally exhausted all his strength. However, his mouth never stopped, and a string of incomprehensible curses came out of his mouth. Guevara walked in front of the subterranean dweller and slowly stepped on the subterranean dweller's head. The subterranean dweller twisted his body and then grabbed Guevara's leg. He opened his wet mouth and bit Guevara's leg with all his might. Listen to his voice carefully, Guevara said calmly. Han Jin and Lang Ning could clearly hear that the subterranean dweller's voice was filled with fierceness and hatred. Guevara slowly used his strength. The subterranean dweller's head gradually changed shape. Then, with a bang, it shattered like a watermelon on the ground. Release that subterranean dweller again, Guevara said. Every subterranean dweller repeated the actions of their companions. Even though they knew what was waiting for them, they would not give in. Their screams were getting fiercer and fiercer, and their actions were getting more and more intense. You don't understand the subterranean dwellers. You always like to look at them with the eyes of other humans. That's not a good idea. Guevara's eyes became hollow. No one knew what he was thinking. Whether it's persuasion or threats, neither is a good idea. Then what should we do? Lang Ning asked. I've lived for more than 70 years. Do you know what the biggest lesson I've learned is? Guevara said softly. Don't trust other races so easily, including dragons and elves. Little guy, I don't mean to provoke you. What I want to say is, our hearts are different from theirs. Hearts, do you understand? I've been to the underground world, to the dragon realm, to the moonlight forest, to the desert. I've been many places, so I know more. Follow me. I'll tell you some interesting stories. Han Jin and Lang Ning looked at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. Although some things can't be seen or touched, they're more important than anything else. Guevara's old voice sounded. For example, the Dragon Knight will never ride his own dragon to attack the Dragon City, and the elves will never offer the Spring of Life to any race. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.